Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the second part of What If Deku's Death Awakened His Quirk? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. It was a tearful thank you that Izuku experienced when he met Oboro's parents in the main atrium. The couple were delirious with emotion, even going down onto their knees, Dejiza style, to thank him for bringing their son back. In all honesty, Izuku was a tad bit unnerved, not used to having such wild displays of emotion played out before him. Still, he managed to pull himself together, convince the Shirakumos to get up, and express his hope that this closure will help them move forward. To his credit, Izuku managed to tone his reply into something that didn't resemble those half-baked, meaningless platitudes heroes and law enforcement tend to give to the bereaved family members of victims who tragically died, if the commending glint in Aizawa's eyes was any indication. The meeting itself was short, as Aizawa and present Mike were to immediately escort the Shirakumos to the crematory to have their son's body disposed of before history could repeat itself. After some final farewells, they were gone, leaving Izuku on his own. Fumikage returned a moment later. "How's your uncle? Did you manage to convince him not to turn Mizudafu upside down?" "Funny that you should mention him, Midoriya," Fumikage replied. "Apparently my uncle isn't in Mizudafu right now." "What happened?" Izuku asked curiously. "I wouldn't call it a strange twist of events, but while we were fighting off villains back at the USJ, my uncle's sister was caught up in another villain attack while out shopping with her family. She's fine, and so are her family, but she sustained some injuries and was hospitalized," Fumikage explained. "As you would expect, my uncle took the first train to Hamamatsu in order to be with her. I only just saw his message and confirmed it with him over a phone call. He also told me that he won't be back until Monday afternoon. So you'll be all alone for the next 3 days, essentially?" "That's correct." A beat of silence followed. "Are you okay with living by yourself?" "In normal circumstances, I would be fine with that, but..." Fumikage trailed off, looking into the distance for a moment. "Following the events of this afternoon, I would be lying to myself if I said I don't desire some company for the time being. Dark Shadow definitely needs someone else other than me." To prove his point, the shadow being emerged from her host and immediately hugged Izuku. "How about you stay over at my place?" the Phoenix offered. "Knowing my mother, she would love to have someone by my side until this whole thing blows over." "I don't want to intrude though." "Nonsense," Izuku brushed off. "It'll certainly help, knowing that she will be losing her marbles once she gets the call from Aizawa-sensei. Also, I don't think Dark Shadow is going to let go of me anytime soon unless she knows I'm in the same general area as her." "I most certainly won't," the shadow being cried, hugging Izuku harder. "You should at least call your mother first," Fumikage advised. "I intend to do that," Izuku nodded. Izuku would spend 5 minutes calming down his frantic mother over the phone. Apparently, Aizawa had called her just minutes before his own, and her reaction was completely understandable and expected by Izuku. When she finally came down from her panic-induced hysteria, Izuku presented the proposal of Fumikage coming over to stay with them for the weekend, while explaining the circumstances. Inko was more than happy to have the raven-headed teen over, and when Izuku ended the call, the last words he heard from his mother was her muttering to herself over preparing bigger portions for dinner later. All that was left to do now was to return to Fumikage's place of residence and grab enough clothes for a weekend stayover. Fumikage lived in low-rise apartment building in a suburb not unlike the one Izuku lived in. It was a 2-bedroom unit, and it was immediately clear which one of the two belonged to the raven-headed teen. While the rest of the apartment walls were painted a soft peach-hued beige, Fumikage's room was painted entirely black. The wooden furniture was a dark type of wood, and all manner of items that would not look out of place in an occult film decorated the room. A black duffel bag, of course, was pulled out, and 4 nights' worth of clothing went into it, alongside Fumikage's toothbrush. "You really love the dark goth aesthetic, don't you?" "I am one with the dark," which was all that Fumikage replied, and Izuku accepted it without a further word. Locking up the apartment, The two avians hopped onto the train again for a ride up to Izuku's apartment. When they arrived, Fumikage was eternally grateful that he was still wearing his tinted sunglasses. Midoriya Inko carried not a candle to his friend's perpetual brightness, but the beaming smile she gave as she welcomed him and Dark Shadow into her home still exuded a light that would have made most people flinch. At least she was very friendly and incredibly hospitable, inviting him to bring his clothes to Izuku's room while she put the finishing touches on dinner. Fumikage noted that his friend's room was a complete contrast to his own. For one thing, the walls were all white, just like with the rest of the apartment that he had seen thus far. Though he noted parts of the walls seemed to be lighter than the rest. Did there used to be something pasted on the walls? Yep, Izuku nodded, helping his friend take out his clothes. Back when I was still a naive, innocent child, my walls and room were filled with All Might merchandise. To be honest, there was more poster than wall at the highest point. But after that fateful meeting, and the activation of my quirk, I decided to get rid of every All Might merchandise and paraphernalia from my room. Remembering what his friend told him of that very day, Fumikage's mind immediately wandered to a scene of a vindictive phoenix tearing the posters to shreds and cremating every known piece of merchandise available on the market. For the record, I didn't go on a fiery rampage on All Might's irritating smile, Izuku continued, seemingly reading Fumikage's mind. Several pieces I had are really valuable on the market. I made sure to carefully pack everything into packages or boxes before selling them. I actually got quite a nice sum from the transactions. Makes sense, the raven-headed teen remarked inwardly. Izuku, Tokoyami-kun, dinner's ready. Having dinner with the Midoriyas was an experience in of itself. Not that the food was bad or anything, Inko was an excellent cook. It was just that Fumikage never expected the extremely animated conversations that took place over the course of the meal. This was, in a way, foreign territory, especially since his uncle wasn't exactly the sociable type and mealtimes were often periods of verbal silence back at his place of residence. At the same time, it was a nice feeling, especially when Izuku and his mother always ensured that he was included in the conversations. Although he could do without the intense brightness that radiated around the dining table, Fumikage was almost certain that he had taken a few steps closer to going blind. He would have worn his sunglasses, but he didn't want to come off as rude. That aside, Fumikage could count dinner with his friend's family a success. Inko cleared the dishes and bowls, shooing him and Izuku off to have alone time while she ran the dishwasher. The two teens headed back to Izuku's room, who immediately beelined for his wardrobe to pull out the extra futon that he stowed up on top for such occasions. Which was almost never, thanks to a certain explosive bastard that shall not be named. How deep into the occult do you go into? The phoenix asked offhandedly. The temptation to fully submerge myself into the deep unknown always follows me, Fumikage replied, watching his friend pull down the futon and lay it out on the floor next to the bed. But I am aware that going too far can have unintended consequences, so I discipline myself with whatever practice or ritual I discover. So you spend the nights using the Ouija board, among other things? Izuku guessed, pulling out a pillow for his friend. I tend to stick to the Ouija board and rituals to ward off anything questionable from moving through the veil, Fumikage replied. So far, I've yet to have anything happen to me, though I do wonder if the events at the USJ was my karma finally catching up to me. To be fair, I know next to nothing about the occult, but I can at least understand why you think of this afternoon's events as such. Izuku came back to his friend. Maybe your survival was a manner of evening things out? Perhaps, though I suppose I should lay off the seances for a while anyway. It's your decision, Izuku shrugged. The two avians went to freshen up for the night. Slipping into their respective covers, Dark Shadow emerged from Fumikage's body to turn off the light. Though, as Fumikage was quick to discover, the darkness didn't completely come. I didn't know that your body continues to glow even in darkness, Midoriya? Yeah, there's nothing I can do about it, the Phoenix replied. If you ask me to infiltrate a villain hideout, I'm not your bird for the job. On the bright side, Fumikage replied, unintentionally making a pun, it'll keep Dark Shadow from doing too much. What do you mean? Right on cue, the shadow being emerged, Fumi always sleeps with a nightlight at home. It is to stop me from growing out of control and becoming feral, as he says. The darkness fuels my growth, which is why he never lets me out in places where it's dark. What happens when you go feral, Shadow-chan? Bad things, eyes, really bad things? I usually refrain from talking about it, Fumikage added. It happened once after Dark Shadow manifested. It was painful for everyone involved. Izuku took the cue and decided it was time to go to sleep. And eventually, he, Fumikage and Dark Shadow drifted off, the third dulled by the phoenix's eternal glow. For a while, all was silent. It wasn't uncommon for Izuku to wake up in the middle of night, seeking a glass of water. With his entire body made up of fire, it meant that his insides tend to get parched easily, requiring more frequent rehydration. While this partly the reason why Izuku woke up in the early morning hours of 15 minutes past 3, the other part lay with his friend, tossing and turning in his futon and making noises of distress. Dark Shadow hovered over her host, trying and failing to rouse him from the clutches of nightmare he was caught in. Izuku was immediately out of his bed. Dark Shadow moved out of the way, as the phoenix knelt down beside Fumikage. Tokoyami, wake up. You're having a nightmare. Wake up. Izuku laid a clawed hand on his friend's body, the flames glowing brighter. Immediately, Fumikage snapped awake and shot up with a loud gasp. The phoenix wrapped his friend in a hug. Breathe with me, Tokoyami. You're fine. You're okay. Everything's all right. You're in my room. Just breathe with me, okay? Dark Shadow hovered anxiously, as Izuku led her host through a series of exaggerated breaths to help him bring the adrenaline down. Midoriya? It's okay, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Izuku tightened his hug to prove his point. Dark Shadow made a distressed whine. Do you want to talk about it? Fumikage subconsciously leaned into his friend's warmth. It was a fragmented sight, like I was watching a badly edited film. But I remember, I was back at the USJ. I saw our classmates and Aizawa-sensei. All of them were dead. I saw you. Your head was bent at an unnatural angle, your wings torn off your body. The hand villain was laughing, and the Numu was reaching for me. Then I was woken up by you. Izuku carted a hand through his friend's head feathers. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I killed the villains and the Numu. They will never hurt a soul ever again. Dark Shadow quickly joined the hug. The minutes ticked by. Nobody moved. I am at ease with the dark, but in such occasions like this, it reminds me that true darkness is a place where no mortal should ever face. Does that mean you won't be able to sleep now? I'm not entirely sure. The nightmares I've had in the past were never this vivid. Izuku considered something, a bit unsure if Fumikage would appreciate it. His conscience overruled his doubt quickly. How about a lullaby? What? This sounds really cheesy, but when I was younger, nightmares used to plague my sleep almost all the time. Fumikage didn't need to guess the source of such nightmares. My mother would hear my screams, and she would burst in with a lullaby at the ready. Despite its rather ominous messaging, it always works for me. What lullaby is it? Are you familiar with the Frozen franchise, specifically the second movie? Fumikage shook his head after a moment. He couldn't say that he knew such a franchise, since it doesn't ring a bell, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't have watched it since it wasn't his favorite genre of movies. Well, it's titled All Is Found. Let's hear it then. Izuku adjusted his position to make Fumikage feel more comfortable. Where the north wind meets the sea, there's a river full of memory. Sleep, my darling, safe and sound, for in this river all is found. Fumikage never expected this. Midoriya, your voice is so melodious. I guess it has to do with the fact that I'm a phoenix, Izuku replied. Do you want me to continue? Yes, please. In her waters, deep and true, lie the answers and a path for you. Dive down deep into her sound, but not too far or you'll be drowned. Fumikage now understood what Izuku meant by ominous messaging. Yes, she will sing to those who'll hear, and in her song, all magic flows. But can you brave what you most fear? Can you face what the river knows? By this point, Fumikage could feel his eyelids beginning to droop, but at the same time, he didn't want to sleep yet, not when he felt the temporal energy in the room rise with the building orchestra. Where the north wind meets the sea, there's a mother, full of memory. Come, my darling, homeward bound. When all is lost, then all is found. With the winding down of the emotional energy, Fumikage couldn't stop the effects of Morpheus from dragging him under. Izuku glanced down, realizing that his friend had fallen back into sleep. Aizu, you are a great burb. I would do anything for him. Dark Shadow regarded him with pleading eyes. Can Aizu sleep in the same bed with Fumi? Aizu will protect Fumi from all nightmares if he is with him. I will. Being careful not to wake his sleeping friend, Izuku slipped back into his own bed and pulled the covers over him and Fumikage. Dark Shadow slipped in too after a moment, wrapping herself around her host and Izuku. All three forms bundled together, coupled with Izuku's permanent warmth, meant that the Phoenix and Shadow being had joined the Raven in quiet slumber within minutes. None of them noticed that the bedroom was slightly ajar, before quietly closing. Like her son, Inko was prone to waking up in the middle of the night, needing a glass of water. On this particular night, she managed to get what she needed. One glass of water later, she was heading back to her room when she heard voices coming from her son's bedroom. Pushing down her fears that some villain had managed to invade their home, Inko opened the door slightly, sighing in relief when it was just Izuku and Fumikage talking. Though the relief quickly became concerned sympathy when the two teens talked about the nightmare one of them just had. Poor things, they were only 16. None of them should have been made to face what they went through at the USJ until they were prepared and ready. At the very least, Inko thought to herself, Yui is making sure that they will receive all the help they should get once the school reopens. That in of itself was a good move, but it would be days until they would receive such help. What could they do now? Where the north wind meets the sea. Inko blinked. There's a river, full of memory. She did not expect this. Like Fumikage, this was the first time Inko had heard her son sing, and she couldn't look away. She quietly watched Izuku sing the exact same lullaby she herself would sing to him when he was younger to the raven-headed teen. It had its intended effect by the end of the song. Fumikage had fallen back to sleep. Izuku then climbed back into his bed, with Fumikage in his arms, and was soon asleep himself, with Dark Shadow wrapped around them. When their gentle snores reached her ears, Inko quietly closed the door. She could have returned to her bedroom, reassured that her son had gotten the situation under control. But Inko was more perceptive than that. She knew that this was a temporary solution for a long-term problem. Her son and Fumikage needed something else to help them move forward from this traumatic event. Hearing the lullaby gave Inko an idea. Instead of returning to her bedroom, she made a detour towards the study. Booting up the family computer, she opened a website to make plans. Come sunrise, Izuku believed that this particular Friday was just going to be a laid-back one. He and Fumikage had nothing planned, and wasn't that the beauty of flexibility? All sorts of possibilities laid before them. They could spend the day at home, surfing through the channels on TV or the vast expanse of the internet. Or they could head back to Fumicage's favorite cafe and people watch. Maybe they could even wander around Mizudafu, letting fate determine what they would do this particular day. Neither he nor his friend could have expected Inko's announcement over the breakfast table. Izuku, Tokoemi-kun, you two are off to Disneyland and Disney Sea today. What? Inko explained, I couldn't help but overhear about Tokoemi-kun's nightmare last night, and I figured that you two need something to put your mind elsewhere until you receive sanctioned help from Yui. And I thought, why not the so-called happiest places on Earth? Izuku's mind made the connection. Is it because of the lullaby I sang to Tokoemi? Partly, and also because I've never taken you to either park before, Inko replied, but that's beside the point. These are your tickets. She pushed 2 pieces of paper with barcodes printed on them towards the 2 aviants. I've also taken the liberty to include whole-day unlimited fast passes into your tickets so that you won't have to deal with those annoying crowds and queues. Both Izuku and Fumikage took the tickets, stared at them for a moment, before turning to one another. I know this is extremely sudden and out of the blue, but are you okay with this? To be honest, I don't really know much about Disneyland or Disney Sea, other than they are theme parks, Fumikage admitted, but I can't say that I am not curious about it. I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time there, you two, Inko grinned. But what about you, Mum? Oh, don't worry about me. I have work today, and after that I have a dinner with my colleagues. Inko brushed off, just have fun, okay? It was obvious that the two avians were not going to refuse such a generous gift, even if one was more enthusiastic about it. One of them would simply have to show the other a world where happiness is the name of the game. Packed with an extra set of clothes and some cash for meals, Izuku and Fumikage took the train for a 40-minute ride down to the Magic Kingdoms. It was decided, after a short discussion, that they would visit Disneyland first. Even though most schools were still in session, the entrance was packed with people, mostly parents with young children. The two avians spent 20 minutes waiting in line to have their bags checked and their tickets scanned before they actually entered the park itself. "Do you have a map?" asked Fumikage as they went through the retail area known as the World Bazaar. "Yep, snagged one from one of the ticketing booths outside," Izuku replied, producing a folded pamphlet which he unfurled and shared with his friend. "Since Disneyland is circular-shaped, I think we should go in a clockwise direction." He trailed a clawed finger to the left. "There's Adventureland, which has the world-famous Pirates of the Caribbean ride and the Jungle Cruise." Honestly, the Pirates of the Caribbean ride is the more well-known ride since people have been known to dump their loved ones' cremated ashes into the water. Tokoyami blinked. "Pardon? While I don't think such incidents have occurred here in Tokyo, but I know that at the Disneyland in California and Disney World in Florida, people have been caught scattering cremated ashes throughout the parks, especially in rides such as Pirates of the Caribbean." Fumikage remained silent, even as he and Izuku began walking again. "People actually do that? They think it's a nice gesture for their departed loved ones, especially if they are Disney fans, but honestly it just causes more headaches for park employees. And such a gesture is wasted when the ashes are simply cleaned up and sent to a landfill afterwards. What a mad banquet of darkness." Just like at the park entrance, there was already a long line snaking into the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. But with their fast passes, Izuku and Tokoyami bypassed the people in line and were at the ride-boarding bay in less than a minute. They boarded their boat, with Dark Shadow emerging to take the seat next to her host. One ride through the Louisiana Bayou and all kinds of pirate imagery and tomfoolery later, they emerged out into the sunlight. "I could honestly see multiple chances for people to toss ashes over the boat," Tokoyami remarked, "but then again, I'm sure the entire ride is monitored by employees. Night vision technology exists for such reasons," Izuku added. The Jungle Cruise was honestly not that interesting, since the animals were not even real and the onboard narration given by the cast member was rather cheesy in the avians' opinions. Moving out of Adventureland, Izuku and Fumikage stepped into the next zone known as Western Land. "Ah, there's something interesting here," said Izuku, pulling out the map. "The Big Thunder Mountain. Sounds like a roller coaster," Fumikage remarked. "That's because it is one of the classics, apparently," Izuku replied, folding up the map and putting it away. "Have you been on roller coasters before, Tokoyami?" "A few, but I can't say whether I'm a fan or not. Let's see if today can change that." Fumikage shrugged. Rises and falls, sudden turns, loop-de-loops and adrenaline pumps later, both avians and one shadow being emerged, feathers literally ruffled. "I think I can shift my perception about roller coasters into something more positive," Fumikage said after a moment. "Well, there are more of such rides around Disneyland and Disney Sea." Izuku smirked. Fumikage turned to his friend and grabbed his arms. "I want to go on all of them." Single. One. Izuku's smirk grew. "Your wish is my command." Thanks to their fast passes, Izuku and Fumikage went through each roller coaster attraction in both Disney parks at least 5 times. The classics included Space Mountain and Splash Mountain, and a junior ride called Gadget's Go Coaster, which Dark Shadow apparently enjoyed the most. Other attractions in Disneyland, such as the dark rides, were another fast favorite for Fumikage and Dark Shadow. But perhaps the two most intriguing rides were the Haunted Mansion and It's a Small World. I can understand why people in America would scatter their loved ones' ashes in the Haunted Mansion, but the It's a Small World ride? Again, I think these people believe it's a nice gesture, but it just gives the park employees unnecessary headaches. But why that particular ride? Even I found the entire experience bizarre. Why would anyone want to spend eternity hearing that unsettling song on repeat? Some people just have different tastes, I think. Truly a mad banquet of darkness. Once all the Disneyland rides had been completed, they headed next door to Disney Sea where their adrenaline-seeking adventure continued. Fumikage and Dark Shadow especially enjoyed the Tower of Terror ride, a free-fall attraction with a backstory that prompted a discussion about colonialism and cultural exploitation during the pre-Quirk era between the two avians over their lunch meals. Having covered all the rides they wanted to try by mid-afternoon, Izuku and Fumikage finished off their day in the Magic Kingdoms with a must-do activity, character meet and greets. Admittedly, Fumikage couldn't exactly enjoy this wind-up of their outing since he never really watched Disney movies before and knew about the characters that took up residence in the parks. They did it more for the sake of photographic mementos, rather than a chance to meet their favorite characters. That being said, Izuku had some fun during this time. Heading back to Disneyland, Izuku and Fumikage got in line to meet with Elsa and Anna from the Frozen franchise. The line was filled with excited children hoping to meet the characters, and this wait was arguably the longest since there were so many of these little cretins and their desires to take as many photos as they wanted. Growing a little bored, Izuku decided to be a little cheeky and experiment with something. Immediately, all activity in the room stopped. Izuku tried again. Fumikage turned to his friend with a questioning look. The children were looking around the room in confusion, as were the two women acting as Elsa and Anna. Though, the Elsa actress was quick to catch on, and with an enviable skill of acting in character, she improvised. "Anna, did you hear that?" Her counterpart joined in, "The voice?" The two women turned to the queuing children. "You all heard that, right?" Izuku snickered when all of the children made replies and noises of assent. Elsa clasped her hands together. "Why don't we all have a little adventure? A voice is calling out to us. There must be a meaning behind it." Anna gripped her sister's arm. "I'm coming with you. I'm not going to let you just run off on your own like last time." As the children cheered and followed the two women out of the room, Fumikage turned to Izuku. What did she mean by last time? Izuku regarded his friend with a serious expression. "I have got to show you both movies when we get back." He then took out his phone to check the time. 5:45. "I think we should grab dinner before the fireworks show." The show itself was supposed to start at 9 p.m., but Izuku and Fumikage wanted to avoid the dinner crowd and grab a good spot to watch the night sky light up with colorful explosives. Given how crowded Disneyland was throughout the day, nightfall did nothing to deter the numbers of parkgoers who still lingered around. By 7:30 p.m., when Izuku and Fumikage snagged a spot in front of the iconic Cinderella's castle, there was already a crowd forming. An hour later, barely anyone could move as spectators began taking up any remaining space available. By 8:45 p.m., employees had stopped entry to any more parkgoers for safety reasons. At 9 sharp, the show commenced. Despite the loud noise and blinding lights, Dark Shadow loved the performance of exploding fireworks, bursts of fire and dancing fountains against the backdrop of the iconic castle and orchestral music playing in tune to many well-known songs from the films. Lasers and lights projected images upon the castle, adding to the visual performance amidst the sounds. Finally, at the closure of the 20-minute performance, an orchestral climax propelled the final blast of fireworks high into the air, ending with a continuous explosion of gunpowder that lasted for about 15 seconds. As the lights faded, the spectators applauded loudly, before beginning to disperse. Some would attempt to squeeze in one final ride of their favorite attraction before the park closed, while more decided to call it a day and head back towards the exit. Did you enjoy the fireworks? Immensely, and I think Dark Shadow can attest to that. I most certainly can. Izuku checked the time. Shall we head back? Or try to squeeze in one more ride? I would prefer to head back, actually. I believe we've had enough fun today. All right then, let's go. As one might expect, the train ride back to Mizudafu was crowded with other parkgoers heading home. By the time they reached Izuku's station, whatever energy they had left in their bodies had been spent standing the entire journey back. Izuku and Fumikage barely got back to the former's apartment before their legs gave way. Inko still had not come back from her dinner with her colleagues. "Shish, I'm knackered. I think I'll get the bath running. Do you mind waiting for a few minutes?" "Not at all, but Midoriya?" "Yeah. Is it okay if you could sing me to sleep tonight?" Turning to his friend, Izuku smiled. "You didn't need to ask. I have every intention of doing so every night while you're here. Fumikage grinned appreciatively. Thank you. After that fun-filled day at the Magic Kingdoms, the rest of the weekend passed by slowly and quietly. As promised, Izuku showed the Frozen movies to Fumikage, alongside the family's collection of other Disney films that they had in the house. The marathon lasted for hours, and along the way, Dark Shadow had become addicted to the songs and had begun to belt them out at random intervals. Even at inopportune moments like when her host was in the bathroom. Come Monday, it was time for the two avians to return to Ute. Luckily, it appeared that whatever hubbub about the USJ incident had already died down. Their commute to Yui Station went by peacefully and uninterrupted. This time, there were no vultures known as the press congregated outside the school gates. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that they went through the villain attack themselves, it would have seemed like nothing had happened. Izuku and Fumikage arrived at their classroom and took their seats. Several of their classmates were already present, with more coming in as homeroom approached. When the bell rang, those who weren't at their seats rushed to their desks, as Aizawa sauntered into the room, grasping a large latte as if his life depended on it. Good morning, sensei. So you spoke up, you look all right, Aizawa-sensei. You can thank Midoriya for that, the eternally tired hobo replied. While he was incredibly reckless last Thursday, his healing powers are a godsend. I did what I had to do, sensei. Aizawa nodded, before continuing, moving on, there are a couple of announcements I have to make today, so listen up. The entire class straightened. After the events of last Thursday, the school has decided that each and every one of you will have mandatory sessions with Hound Dog, Yui's guidance counselor and trained therapist. You all have gone through a traumatic event that none of you should have been forced to experience until much later in life, and the school is not going to take any chances. Several of the students appeared like they wanted to speak up, but Aizawa raised a hand for silence. You may think that such sessions are unnecessary, that you are all fine. I can guarantee you, this is not the case. People adapt to trauma differently, but having a trained professional by your side will help the process move along easier. I also want to stress that such sessions are mandatory. Unless you have a valid excuse, missing such sessions will warrant a detention. Am I clear? Yes, sensei, the class chorused. Good, now the second announcement. In 2 weeks, Yui will be holding its annual sports festival. A beat of silence. Aizawa-sensei, Izuku spoke up, do you think this is a good idea, given how Yui was invaded by villains only a few days ago? I did raise such a point myself, the hobo replied, confirming the Phoenix's suspicions that the man himself didn't think it was a good idea, but Nizu also raised several good points. First, while we were able to contain the media spread about the USJ incident, we can't sweep the fact that Yui was invaded by villains under the carpet. By holding the sports festival, we are showing to the country that we will not be cowed by villainy. Second, Nizu reasoned that teleportation quirks are extremely rare, none that can hold a candle to Keikurogiri's quirk. Izuku didn't miss the slight hiccup over Kuro no Oboro's post-death identity. Nizu believed that a repeat of what happened at the USJ is extremely unlikely, especially with the third reason, we will have more pro-heroes stationed around Yui to prevent any funny business from happening. Izuku nodded. 2 weeks, Aizawa turned his attention back to the class as a whole, that is the time that you have to prepare. You have 3 chances throughout your education at Yui. As much as I dislike theatrics, this is a rare opportunity to get your image out there and establish your name as a hero in training. Realistically, many doors can open, but also slam shut, depending on your performance. Don't squander this opportunity. Leaving his words to set in, Aizawa turned to Izuku. Midoriya, a word outside, please. Nodding, the Phoenix got up from his seat and followed the hobo out of the room, just as the rest of his class broke into an excited hubbub. Midoriya, as you scored the highest number of points during the practical assessment, you will be opening the sports festival with the competitor's pledge. A speech, I presume? That's right, Aizawa nodded. Also, during the lunch break, go see Recovery Girl. She wants to talk to you. Noted, sensei. Class 1A had modern art history, taught by midnight, and modern literature lessons before the lunch break, but it was evidently clear that most of the students were too excited to completely pay attention to their teachers. The bell for lunch couldn't come soon enough, and no sooner had Cementos left the room, whatever excitement that had been brewing throughout the morning came up to the light. The sports festival. Idru punched his fist into the air. I am so fucking pumped. This is going to be fucking fun. Tetsu shared the excitement with his red-headed counterpart. I can't wait to kick some ass. This was the sentiment experienced by most of the class. Izuku and Fumikage were two of the exceptions, ignoring their classmates as they headed for the door. The Phoenix had informed his friend of what he needed to do later, so they went off first so that Izuku could eat something before his meeting with Recovery Girl. That was the plan, at least. None of them expected the literal crowd of students standing outside their classroom when Izuku opened the door. A beat of silence, when the gathered crowd realized that their presence had been discovered. Excuse me, but what are you all doing here? Another beat of silence. So, this is the famous one, an unpleasant-sounding voice sneered. There was movement in the crowd, as someone pushed themselves to the front. It was a teenage male with slick blonde hair, slightly taller than Izuku, and wearing the most arrogant expression the Phoenix had ever seen someone have on their face. Who are you? Fumikage asked. The blonde clicked his tongue. Of course you wouldn't know who I am. So full of yourselves that you don't even deign us a glance, despite the fact that we are literally next door. You didn't answer the question, Izuku deadpanned, already not liking whoever this pompous bastard is. Minoma Nito, from the esteemed 1B, the blonde smirked. All right, Minoma, do you mind moving aside so that we can go have our lunch? What? Do you really think that we'll just step aside and bow down to you as if we are nothing more than common peasants? Nito snorted incredulously. You must really be full of yourself, one. He spat the name of their class as if it was something rotten in his mouth. Just because you all beat some villains, you think that you're already big-name heroes whom everyone worships the ground you walk on. I'm very certain that 1B will do a much better job, and we won't be prancing around as if we own the entire world. By this point, many of Izuku's classmates had gathered behind the Phoenix, wondering what was the holdup. Nito's scathing verbal attacks were not lost upon them. Some screeched indignantly, hurling back insults and other cusses not meant to be heard by children. Fumikage could feel dark shadows shaking within him, threatening to emerge and tear this blonde asshole to pieces. Izuku was deceptively calm, not saying anything and letting Nito further dig himself into his grave. Also, the sports festival is coming up. We at 1B are going to show to the entire country that we are the superior class. So what, that you all fought villains? No one is going to remember your silly little escapades when you are all taken down by the might of Dash. Nito never got to say any more, as Izuku's clawed hand shot out and grabbed the blonde by the throat. The gathered students gasped, some shrieked, as Izuku lifted Nito off the ground, grip deathly tight around the bastard's neck. Do you really think that? Izuku's voice was dark, extremely dangerous. Nito immediately knew that he had crossed a line, despite his struggling. Do you honestly believe that one? No, you would have done a much better job taking down the villains? Think about it, Minoma Nito. I'm pretty sure that you're aware that there were over 200 villains at the USJ last week, led by a psychotic manchild with a disintegration quirk, a warp villain who could teleport people anywhere, and a towering genetically engineered monster with multiple quirks? His claws dug into the skin of Nito's neck, drawing blood. Let us forget about the villains, the fodder, we'll call them. The manchild managed to disintegrate my homeroom teacher's elbow before ordering the monster to pummel him into the ground. Izawa-sensei came within inches of death that day, had it not been for my healing abilities. The warp villain managed to teleport most of my class to the different zones of the USJ before we could flee right into the hands of the fodder, and from what I heard, he used his quirk to make 13's quirk turn on them and atomize their entire back. And after all of that, my entire class has to have sessions with Hound Dog to help us process what we went through. So tell me, Minoma Nito, do you truly believe that you could have done a better job when professional heroes with years of experience were nearly killed that day? Izuku took vindictive pleasure in seeing the fear cross the blonde's face. Let me tell you, right in front of everyone here, that you will not stand a chance. If the circumstances had been reversed, I'm pretty sure your parents would be called in to identify your corpse. Or rather, what is left of your corpse, because I firmly believe that you would have been pulpified and disintegrated should you have been forced to face the monster and the man-child like Aizawa-sensei had did. He heard hurried footsteps trying to push their way through the crowd, but he continued nonetheless. Minoma Nito, you are in the heroics course, regardless of class name. Yet your current attitude leaves plenty to be desired. Let me fill you in on a secret. Aizawa-sensei expelled someone from 1A because he had no potential and exhibited unheroic behavior towards his classmates. If my homeroom teacher was yours instead, you wouldn't have survived the first day. You would have been kicked to the curb faster than you can go on about your little spiel on superiority. Count your blessings, and pray that you develop enough brains to actually be a decent person, because I can guarantee that if you continue this arrogant behavior, your days as a hero in training will be numbered. This is your only warning. Trash talk my class again, and you will very quickly learn why that man-child, warp villain and monster that I mentioned earlier are no longer threats to society. Izuku tossed Nito to the ground, the watching students moving back out of reflex. The arrogant blonde coughed and spluttered, grabbing at his throat which was red from the flames and bleeding. Why-you-dash? Minoma, that's enough. A girl with orange hair emerged from the crowd and grabbed Nito by the scruff of his collar. She turned to Izuku and bowed deeply. I'm so sorry for all the trouble Minoma-kun has caused for you. He doesn't represent the entirety of 1B, and I don't know where he got all of his delusions of superiority from. Who are you? Kendo Itsuka, class representative of 1B, the girl introduced herself. Please excuse us. Without a further word, Itsuka dragged Nito away, the latter squawking in protest and earning a hard slap to the head for running his tongue. Izuku and Fumikage watched them go, the former turning back to the crowd. I believe we're done here. Can you please move? You're blocking the corridor. The crowd began to disperse, many giving the Phoenix uneasy looks as he and Fumikage passed. Two individuals, in particular, stared at Izuku's direction long after he had disappeared from sight. One of them was a chronic insomniac with gravity-defying lilac hair. Initially, he had joined the crowd in an attempt to issue a declaration of war against 1A, but his plans were completely upended by Izuku's speech while almost choking Nito with just one hand. Seeing that his would-be audience was already dispersing, the boy left, vowing to make his proclamation come the sports festival. The second was one we temporarily bid farewell to after his departure many chapters back. Just like the lilac-haired insomniac, the spiky blonde-haired bully had his own declaration of war to give against the students of the class which he believed he should have been part of since the beginning, not stuck in general education like the insomniac. And again, like his lilac-haired classmates, the blonde was forced to temporarily shelve his plan following Izuku's actions and the dispersing of the crowd. But unlike the insomniac, the blonde didn't leave quietly. Muttering darkly and dropping expletives like hailstones, he stomped off to someplace where he could explode things without getting into trouble. With 20 minutes left before the end of lunch break, Izuku separated from Fumikage to head down to the infirmary. Knocking on the door, he let himself into the room that faintly smelled of disinfectant. 2 rows of beds lined the room with curtains partitioning each one for some privacy. At the other end of the room was a desk with folders, files, and a high-end laptop. Recovery Girl was attending to some paperwork when Izuku entered. Recovery Girl? You wish to see me? The elderly Medi-heroine looked up from her laptop. Ah, Midoriya-kun, you're here. Yes, there's something I would like to talk with you about. Please, have a seat. Izuku nodded, going up to the bed closest to Recovery Girl's desk and sitting down. Aizawa-kun should have mentioned this by now. The sports festival is in 2 weeks. As such, we can expect a lot more injuries from students battling one another and going overboard with their antics. I would like to recruit you as my temporary assistant to help me tend to the injuries during the festival, especially since your healing abilities do not appear to have any side effects on the recipient. I'm willing to help, but I guess this means that I won't be sitting with my classmates to spectate the festival, then? That's right, Recovery Girl nodded. However, we will have television monitors installed in the infirmary so that you can still watch the festival as it progresses. Understood. So when exactly do you want me to come in? I am not allowed to disclose what you and the rest of the first years will be doing during the festival, but I will say that the whole thing is split into 3 parts. As the first two are back-to-back, I will only require you to come in after the second event. Alright, got it. Is there anything else? Yes, actually. Monoma-kun from 1B came in earlier with first-degree burns around his neck and puncture wounds that were bleeding. When I asked what happened, he said that you attempted to choke him. Is that true? I did, Izuku replied bluntly, but only because he was trash-talking my class and trivializing what we went through at the USJ last Thursday. He was braying like a donkey about how 1B was superior and that they would do a better job taking down the villains we faced that day. If he had left us alone and not let his superiority complex compel him to dig his own grave, none of this would have happened. That may be so, but I beseech you to exercise restraint when dealing with unpleasant individuals. Not everyone are on the same level as the villains that you faced. Furthermore, Monoma-kun is not your classmate. Leave him to his class representative to be dealt with. I'm willing, but what if Monoma deliberately seeks me out? I have no choice but to take matters into my own hands if he doesn't stand down or if Kendo-san is nowhere in sight. Recovery Girl sighed. As I said, just exercise restraint. I do not wish to see a promising healer get into unnecessary trouble. Seeing that nothing else needed to be said, Izuku excused himself and left the infirmary. There was only about 10 minutes left before the next bell, and he didn't want to be late returning to class. The 2 weeks were extremely busy for both Izuku and Fumikichi. It would have been easy for them to rely on their quirks to sweep through the sports festival, but realistically, that was not possible. Fumikichi knew all too well that Dark Shadow can be completely defeated if someone was to shine a blinding light upon the shadow being, leaving him completely defenseless as he had virtually no experience in hand-to-hand combat. Izuku found himself in a similar situation, but the events leading up to this conclusion was extremely different. As cliched as it sounded, it came as a revelation in the middle of the night. Izuku had been on the precipice of falling asleep when it came with as much subtlety as a train wreck. He shot up from his bed, stared into the darkness as the realization fully set in, and uttered just one word. Shit. He then fell back onto his pillow and fell into a rather disturbed sleep. As soon as the opportunity presented itself, Izuku beelined to Nizu's office and told the Chimera what had been on his mind. You wish to inhibit your strength during the sports festival? Izuku nodded. I realized that I do not really have control over how hot my flames are. Sure, I am able to control the size of the flames I produce, but I suspect that the temperature remains the same. And given how every time I've used my flames in combat, Nizu set his teacup down, I understand. You're worried that you might accidentally cremate your opponents? Izuku nodded. A very valid point, said Nizu. Luckily, Yui has arguably the best support equipment program in the entire country, save for I-Island. Given such a short time frame, I believe modified Quirk suppressant cuffs will be the best solution for this predicament, although I would also suggest that you seek a second opinion from Power Loader. He's a better expert, after all. Thank you for your suggestion. Izuku got up. Do you happen to know if Power Loader Sensei is free this afternoon? I'm sure he can spare a few minutes, Nizu reassured. He should be in the support labs. If not, in the staff office. Thank you, Principal. The rest of the school day passed. Izuku told Fumikichi to wait for him, and he hurried down to the support labs as fast as he could. Stopping to make sure that the doors didn't explode off their hinges and flatten him into minced chicken, Izuku knocked loudly and let himself in. Hello? Is Power Loader Sensei here? Not 10 seconds later, a loud explosion rocked the lab, followed by crazed laughter of which Izuku vaguely remembered belonged to this Hatsum whom he heard the last time he was here. Power Loader could then be heard shouting incoherently, though Hatsum's laughter only intensified. Izuku briefly wondered if this was a bad time, and made to leave when he heard mechanical noises approach him. Midoriya-kun, I suppose? Good afternoon, Power Loader Sensei. I'm here for an urgent request. What do you mean? Izuku gave the man a brief rundown of what he had discussed with Nizu. By the end of it, Power Loader nodded consideringly. Given the need to protect your fellow first years, I can approve and expedite the process. With a bit of luck, we can create what you need and have it delivered to you by Friday. Thank you so much, Sensei. It's no troop dash. Another large explosion rocked the labs, almost making Izuku fall over. Power Loader literally screamed in exasperation, "Hatsum! For the last fucking time. Do not explode anything or else I will kick you out from the lab and permanently ban you from it." "You can't ban me." This Hatsum cackled back amidst the smoke that enveloped the labs. "I'm your best student. You will be committing a grave crime against creativity. Do not test me, Hatsum." All Power Loader got for that threat was more crazed laughter. Izuku decided that it was time to make himself scarce. He may be a phoenix, but he didn't want to test if he had immortality or not. As promised, come Friday, Power Loader met up with Izuku just as he was returning to class with Fumikage from lunch. He gave the phoenix a small box, containing the modified Quirk suppressant cuffs, styled in the form of bracelets. The man explained that unlike regular suppressant cuffs, this pair would only limit the temperature of Izuku's flames, not eliminate them completely. Now came the next step, training. The afternoons after school had ended for the day were spent in one of Yui's many training grounds. Under the supervision of Aizawa, Izuku tested out his suppressant bracelets to determine how hot his flames now were. The digital thermometer in the hobo's hands registered a much lower temperature of about 540 degrees Celsius, when the normal temperature was easily at least 10 times hotter. Once that had been settled, Aizawa sat Izuku and Fumikage through a crash course on hand-to-hand combat, which their inadequacy became apparent extremely quickly, just as Izuku had suspected. Give the number of times they had their asses kicked by their homeroom teacher and having their beaks taste the faux leather covers of the floor pads, not much needed to be said. But Izuku and Fumikage were determined, and they always jumped back up until exhaustion finally shut their bodies down. Even though his capture weapon hit it, this determination made Aizawa give one of his rare smiles. The hobo would bet his life savings on both of his students making it far in the upcoming sports festival, and if they continued this mindset, they were going to make waves once they stepped foot into the industry. Maybe, perhaps with a lot of luck and guidance, they will bring much-needed reform to a profession that was quickly losing its original meaning for shallow frivolity that was going to one day cost society, as a whole, irrevocably. There was one more thing Izuku needed to do before the day of the sports festival arrived. English class had just ended, and lunch break was upon them. While his classmates rushed off to sate their grumbling stomachs, Izuku hurried to intercept his teacher. "Present, Mike-sensei." The voice hero turned around. "No. How may I help you, little listener? I need to ask, are you emceeing the sports festival?" "That's right, alongside Shoyuta." Present Mike nodded. "How do you know that?" "A calculated guess," Izuku replied, "but that's beside the point. Are you willing to consider a request of mine?" "What do you mean? Can you have my class and 1B enter the stadium together, and have us introduced as a combined unit? I don't want anyone to think that 1A is being given preferential treatment or attention just because we fought villains back at the USJ. The relations between 1A and the rest of the first years are at a crossroads because of our experiences, and I don't want things to sour just because our lives were threatened by the worst of society." Present Mike was silent for a moment as Izuku's reasoning sunk in. However, within 2 seconds the hero was back into his loud, boisterous persona. "You got it, little listener. I will make sure to let Principal Nizu and Vlad King know as soon as possible." "Thank you, sensei. Oh, also, do you mind introducing the other first years based on their departments, so that there is no differentiating between us and them?" The older man flashed him a thumbs up. "You can count on me, listener." Izuku bowed in thanks, before heading off to the cafeteria. There were only 3 days left before the festival, and he had an opening speech to write. He was pensive. It had been more than 2 weeks already, and his loyal pawns were still missing. He had already ordered the doctor to organize search parties and investigations on their whereabouts, but everything came back empty. He had no information on what happened to Shigaraki and Kurogiri. He couldn't allow this. Things were not supposed to go this way. But he knew he could do little. He would be jumping the gun and exposing himself for capture. He had to bide his time and think of new strategies. The overall plan had to be overhauled, and he had to seek new avenues. More time will be inevitably wasted, but there was nothing he could do to prevent that. Curse All Might for putting him in this state. And curse whoever it was that took his pawns away from him. He swore, once he regained his strength and rebuilt the league from the ashes, he will enact his revenge. And he will be victorious. This was it. Izuku took a long, deep breath to settle his trembling nerves. The entire class of 1A had gathered in their designated waiting room. Some attempted conversations with others, while many, just like Izuku and Fumikage, remained silent. The Phoenix had a good reason to be quiet. In the past 3 days, he wrote and rewrote his speech, going through points, striking off mistakes, and rephrasing paragraphs. In the end, though, he decided to forego sticking to a script and simply winging his speech, which he spent the whole of yesterday running through the main points that he wanted to cover. He closed his eyes. Perhaps some temporary darkness could help. Footsteps approached him from behind. Midoriya. Izuku opened his eyes and turned back, as did Fumikage. What's the matter, Todoroki? Now the entire class had their eyes on them. Realistically, you have an advantage over me, Todoroki spoke after a moment. But even so, I refuse to back down. I will beat you with my ice alone, and I will emerge on top. Holy shit, is Todoroki declaring war on Midoriya? Denki whistled. Do what you will, Todoroki, Izuku nodded. But don't forget, you are not the only one participating in this sports festival. Everyone will be aiming for the top 2, as will I. Consider your declaration of war reciprocated. Damn, Midoriya is going feral, Hanta remarked. One could literally feel the tension rise in the room. Idru, the pure soul that he was, tried to diffuse the tightening air around them. Come on, man. Relax, will ya? There's no need to get at each other's throats. We're all friends here. Todoroki glanced at the redhead with a cold look. I'm not here to make friends. This is the chance to prove myself once and for all. Izuku remained silent. Now wasn't the time to intervene on any possible underlying issues. An overhead speaker crackled to life. Class 1A, please make your way to the gate. Come everyone. Momo clapped her hands. It's time to go. Please line up in 2 straight lines. We'll be entering the stadium with 1B. The class assembled with Izuku taking the front with Momo, Fumikage directly behind him. As a united unit, all 19 students left the waiting room, trooped down the corridors and came to a large metal gate, where 1B had already gathered. Immediately, their counterparts all fell silent upon their arrival. Izuku found himself next to Itsuka. Midoriya-kun? Yes, Kendo-san? I heard through the grapevine that it was you who suggested that our classes should enter the stadium together as a united department. I can't thank you enough for being so thoughtful, and for sparing us more headaches from Monoma. No thanks needed, Kendo-san. I did what needed to be done. Just because my class have fought villains, that does not mean that we should get special treatment. We are all heroes in training, and there should be no distinction between us. Itsuka gave the Phoenix a beaming smile, just as the gates rumbled and slid open. Immediately, the roars of the crowd filled the brightening hallway, as Present Mic's amplified voice pierced through the air. May I present to you all, the first-year Heroics Department, classes 1A and 1B. Izuku nodded to Itsuka, and together, both classes trooped out into the sunlight. There must be easily at least 100,000 spectators seated around them. Phones and cameras were out, recording their entry, as were all of the press cameras that were broadcasting the festival live to every single television screen across the country. Loud orchestral music guided them up to the concrete field in the middle of the stadium, where the pro-heroine Midnight was waiting for them on a raised stage. Both classes took their spots, allowing Present Mic to continue his introduction of the other UE departments. First, General Education with classes C, D, and E, second the Support Department with classes F, G, and H, and finally Management with classes I, J, and K. All 219 students stood before their fellow citizens and country as the orchestral music came to a loud end. Midnight produced a cat-o'-nine-tails whip and cracked it over the air. And now, ladies, gentlemen, and every other gender known to mankind, the competitor's pledge, presented to you by Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. Loud applause echoed across the stadium. Fumikage patted his friend's shoulder, who returned the gesture with a nod. Izuku broke off from his class and climbed the steps up to the stage. Midnight stepped to one side, allowing him to take his place before the microphone. Most expected a few words, at most a short speech. No one expected what followed. I'm not going to give meaningless, generic platitudes. Even though the sports festival is a licensed opportunity for us to show off and be scouted by pro heroes, we must not forget our true purpose. All of us gathered on this concrete field are the future of this society, regardless of whether we are in heroics or otherwise. The fact that we are UE students to begin with, it already shows how blessed we are to be given the chance to do immense good for our fellow citizens, and to bring reform to the flaws of society as a whole. Millions of children dream to enroll into UE, but for the vast majority, such dreams are crushed simply because of the labels society have branded them with. Those with weak, villainous, useless quirks. Or even those with no quirk. Izuku took a moment to breathe. The entire stadium was eerily quiet. We do not get to choose what quirk we are born with, or whether we would even get to have one in the first place. But the larger society continues to judge or condemn those who pull the short straws in the genetic lottery. This is fundamentally wrong. These innocent people are pushed to the margins simply for who they are, and in many cases, resort to villainy or crime simply to get by. Izuku turned to his fellow first years. Our responsibility as UE students is to make the world a fairer place. Everyone deserves to live in a safe environment. No one should be bullied, mistreated, or abused simply for who they are. We, as a cohort, must put in the effort to ensure such reform becomes reality. No matter whether you are a hero in training, a future tax-paying citizen, budding support inventor or management personnel, our future, and for those not yet born, rests in our hands. Society is not going to change on its own. We have to be the catalyst. So to open this year's sports festival, to this I say to you all, go beyond your best. And Izuku pulled the microphone off the stand, held it out, plus ultra, and dropped it onto the stage. A moment of silence before the entire stadium roared with noise. The masses rose to their feet in a standing ovation, applauding wildly until their hands smarted. Izuku stepped off the stage to his cheering cohort, receiving fist bumps to the chest and claps to his back. Even Dark Shadow was adding to the noise, a sharp contrast to Fumicage's more mellowed, but no less proud smile to his friend's speech. Holy cow! Talk about a mic drop. Present Mike was truly amazed. Are you taking notes, future politicians? Because that is how you harangue a crowd. Yamada, for the love of everything that is holy, lower your volume. I'm literally right next to you, Aizawa grumbled. Come on, Shoyuta. You've got to admit that that speech was impressive. I won't deny it, yes. But your volume is a completely different matter. Anyways, it's time to get things moving. Present Mick's sudden increase in volume overshadowed his colleague's groan. Nemuri, take it away. Midnight cracked her cat o' nine tails to get everyone's attention. On it, Hizashi. Now pay attention, children, for we are about to go wild with this show. From behind the R-rated heroine, a screen rose up from the ground. A visual display of a slot machine appeared. Then, Midnight pulled a lever which somehow materialized from somewhere, and the slot machine ran with funky music playing in the background. The 3 slots came to a stop. First round, an obstacle course. The slot machine visual disappeared, and a map appeared in its place. All 219 of you will be participating, Midnight began explaining. The entire course spans the circumference of the stadium, approximating 4 kilometers. As long as you stay on the course, you won't be disqualified. Whether you use your quirks or not, it won't matter. But all I'm saying is that only the top 42 will advance to the second round, so you better give it your all. Izuku turned to Fumikage. Tokoyami, do you want a free ride? The raven-headed student would have to be blind to not notice the other students looking at his friend's wings and the hopeful looks in their eyes. Despite the free ticket, he ultimately shook his head. No thanks, Midoriya. I appreciate it, but I want to make it with my own merits. Alright then, all the best. Thank you. I'll see you at the finish line. Across the field from the students, a set of metal doors rumbled open, leading to a long hallway. Alrighty children, time to get ready. Make sure to stay behind the line until flag off. There was a mad dash into the hallway. Izuku followed behind at a much more sedate pace. Over 200 teenagers within a confined space? No way, that was a mess waiting to happen. And when the countdown went off, a mess it definitely became. At the flag-off buzzer, the tight spaces created a bottleneck, exactly the same situation when the press set off the intruder alarm several weeks before and the students panicked in the cafeteria. But Izuku did not let this deter him. As soon as the buzzer went off, he unfurled his wings, kicked off the ground, and while his cohort were stuck against one another, he was already flying out of the hallway and into the light. As he flew off, he vaguely heard the sound of Shoto's ice crackling and Katsuki's explosions igniting, but they quickly petered off as he gained distance. In a show of majestic flight, Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A takes the lead. Will the others manage to keep up? Meanwhile, Shoto and Katsuki burst out of the congested hallway and propelled down the race course with their quirks, quickly followed by several of their 1A classmates who managed to dodge Shoto's ice attack, and one certain crazy inventor from the support department. Several hundred meters ahead, Izuku quickly found himself faced with the first obstacle. The first stage is against giant robots. Will machines be able to stop our flaming chicken? The same robots that were used in the entrance exam loomed large and ready for fire. Several of the two-pointers were already shooting towards Izuku, lasers and bullets aiming at Izuku to knock him out of the sky. But the Phoenix was prepared. Even with his suppressant cuffs on, his flames were still incredibly hot. While the resulting fireballs and flame bursts weren't hot enough to cremate metal, they were enough to blast the robots away. More robots who came after Izuku met the same fates, and when the final line of defense, the zero-pointers, came into view, Izuku unleashed a wall of fire that melted the electronics within the robots, nullifying them into metallic statues. Midoriya Izuku clears the first obstacle with practiced ease. And he is still a good distance from his classmate Todoroki Shoto and Bakugo Katsuki from 1C. I think we can confirm that this round is already in the bag for our flaming chicken. Izuku would have raised an eyebrow if he had any. What did present Mike mean? Leaving the robots behind him, he continued flying ahead. Come about several hundred meters, he came up to the second obstacle. Watch out for that chasm. If you fall, you will be immediately disqualified. Calling it a chasm was an understatement. Izuku surmised that it was more like a canyon than anything else. It was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom of it, and all that connected the two sides were cables attached to little islands or plateaus dotting the canyon. Izuku knew that if one had a fear of heights, they would have great trouble crossing this obstacle. At least, there must be airbags at the bottom to break any falls, he hoped. Seeing that this was not a problem for him, Izuku continued on. After a full minute of flying, he arrived at the third and final obstacle. He paused momentarily. A dirt field? Looks like our flaming chicken is confused. Hey, listener. Throw a fireball at the field and see what happens. Izuku blinked, before shrugging. Can't hurt, he thought. He willed a small fireball in his hand, and threw it at the dirt field. Immediately, there was a loud explosion, and a cloud of dust and smoke rose into the air. Has this answered your curiosity? It's a minefield. Well, good luck to the others then, Izuku thought to himself before flying off. The final kilometer was uneventful, just a course back into the stadium. Izuku lowered his altitude just as the tunnel approached. He wanted to make his re-entry as memorable as possible. This is it, everyone. Our winner is coming through. The light at the end of the tunnel rushed up towards him. Izuku ignited his flames around his wings, as he burst into the stadium in all of his fiery glory. Give it up for Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. The applause was deafening. Izuku did a victory lap around the stadium, culminating in a loud roar amidst a backdrop of fire dancing around him in a show of jubilation. Many kilometers away on the other side of the country in Fukuoka City, members of a certain bird-themed hero agency were all tuned in to watch the live broadcast of the Yui Sports Festival. At first, no one had planned to watch the yearly event, since most have seen some incarnation of it at least once before. But upon seeing a humanoid phoenix with wings give such a fiery opening speech, everyone sans security had abandoned what they were doing and were all glued to whatever screen they could find. Among them was the owner. of the agency and his sidekicks, who had congregated in a conference room to watch the broadcast. Oh my gosh. He's an actual phoenix. Does that mean that he has cool fire powers as well as flight? Shoyo, calm down. I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. Takami Kigo, otherwise known as the number 3 Hero Hawks, watched on with silent curiosity. Sure, he didn't have the same hyperactive excitement as his crow-winged sidekick, but his attention was undeniably piqued. It wasn't every day that one would see a humanoid incarnation of an avian, let alone a mythical phoenix. And when the obstacle course was announced, he knew that he definitely had to see this. This kid, Midoriya Izuku, completely slayed the competition. Once he had gotten through the army of robots, it was a no-brainer. Then Shoyo noticed something. Hey, is he wearing some kind of bracelet? That got everyone's attention. Looks like a pair of modified Quirk suppressant cuffs, one of his other sidekicks guessed. Why would he willfully weaken himself? Another asked. Kigo might have an answer to that. Although he couldn't openly share it with his sidekicks, he did hear, through the grapevine, that when the USJ was attacked by villains 2 weeks prior, one of the students apparently had a flame quirk so hot that he cremated 5 villains to ashes and caused 46 others to be boiled alive. It didn't take much to connect the student with this Midoriya kid, and seeing how his flames effectively decimated the robots despite being inhibited, he could only imagine the damage the kid would cause in a sanctioned event if he went full throttle. Good on his part, at least he cares about collateral damage, Kigo thought to himself. From then on, the kid has it in the bag. He returns to the stadium as the triumphant first-placer, swooping around the masses in a well-earned victory lap and celebrating with a loud raptor-like roar. Immediately, Kigo knew what he had to do next. Ashiwaka, have an internship offer prepared for the kid. Kigo-san, we don't know how well he will perform in the later rounds. I don't care. I want him. He will be my intern. A sigh later, yes, Kigo-san. Back in Mizudafu, Izuku touched down onto the concrete field from his victory lap, the flames dissipating into the warmed air. It took a moment for him to realize his current predicament, once he had also come down from the emotional high. He had 100,000 spectators staring at him, and he was on the screens of every television set in the country. The other 218 competitors were still clearing the course, and God only knows how long that would take. Izuku had to do something, preferably to end the imminent awkwardness that would swiftly come if he didn't. He called out, Yamada-sensei, how much longer will the others take? With Todoroki just clearing the canyon, maybe about another 5 minutes? In the meantime, shall we give the audience some entertainment? Oh yeah? What do you have in mind, little listener? Got some funky beats? Like Gingyue? Immediately, the spectators began to cheer. Even though Gingyue was from the pre-Quirk era, the pair has become immortalized by the government as a national treasure. Their songs are still played on radio stations and remained popular on social media platforms till this day. Any song of your choice? Surprise me. You got it, little listener. Izuku positioned himself in the middle of the concrete field. Present mic hit that's played button, and the first song began to play. It was just as well that Izuku was familiar with all of the songs from Gingyue, and because he had no friends growing up, a lot of his extra time was spent on learning the dances to amuse himself, alongside his hero analysis notebooks. A/N, link is this https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=BuliBZNLO8. Immediately, the spectators burst into enthusiastic cheering in time with the music. Izuku released a small stream of flames that acted as both a visual aesthetic and bait for awe. As he performed the famous Charleston-inspired steps, the audience hyped up their chants, building up the atmosphere for the first verse. Admittedly, Izuku never considered singing while dancing, since his voice movement coordination wasn't exactly the best. But his dance steps were enough to entertain the crowd, especially the intense fire displays during the choruses. Come the instrumental bridge, instead of sticking to the choreography, Izuku put on a firebending show that absolutely wowed the audience. The final chorus had the fire amped up to the next level, with the last note finished with an almighty flame burst that sizzled the air behind Izuku. The spectators burst into raucous applause, giving him a second standing ovation that day. Izuku bowed and waved to his audience. Suddenly, the cheering became a repetitive chant. Encore! Encore! Izuku turned towards the commentator's box. Yamada-sensei. Do we have time for one more? We sure do. Todoroki is just crossing the minefield, followed by Bakugo. I think we can squeeze in one more performance. Again, surprise me, sensei. Hit it. A/N. Link is this https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=OC6EW6GGJC8. The second song came up. This one carried more story than the first, and mixed between electronica funk, soft ballad, and technopop. The fire came once again, and Izuku pulled off another flawless performance, with added attitude for greater effect. Halfway through the song, Shoto crossed the finish line, closely followed by Baku. But Present Mike was too caught up with the impromptu concert to notice and announce their placings. The runners-up stared at Izuku in confusion, who continued dancing as if he hadn't noticed their presence. The other competitors streamed into the stadium and were met with the same sight. Even when the song reached the final chorus, the students were too stunned to join in with the cheering audience. It was only Izuku's final pose at the end, and the spectators' uproarious hollering did someone among the students react. Who? Aizu. Best burb is best dancer. Izuku bowed to the spectators and spread his arms out. Are you all entertained? The entire stadium screamed the affirmative. What a rockin' performance, brought to you by Midoriya Izuku of Class 1A. Yamada, the other students are back. Wait, what? Present Mike did a double take. So they are. Welcome back, everyone else. The names of the top 42 competitors will now be shown on the screens. For those who didn't make it, there's always next time. Namuri, I believe it's time for the second round? Indeed it is. The R-rated heroine cracked her cat o' nine tails. All of those who didn't make it, please vacate the field and head up to your designated seating arrangements. As for the 42 of you, gather around, because we're not done yet. The same screen from earlier rose up from the ground, and Midnight pulled the lever. The slot machine rolled, until it came to a stop 5 seconds later. Up next is a cavalry battle. The screen rolled back into the ground. Midnight explained, for this round, you will be in teams of either 4 or 5. Each of you will be given a headband with a specified number of points. If you're in the 42nd place, you will have 5 points. The higher your placing, the more points you will have. The goal of this event is to grab as many headbands as you can while protecting your own. Bear in mind that only the top 4 teams will progress into the final round, so make sure you do your best. Izuku nodded to himself. This was doable. But, Midnight suddenly added, this in of itself is boring as hell. What if we up the stakes a little bit? Make things a little rougher? What does she mean? Our first place contender, Midoriya Izuku, will carry a headband that will be worth 10 million points. Silence. That's right. If you are able to steal Midoriya's headband and keep it until time runs out, you will be guaranteed a place in the final round. Izuku, as a phoenix, was a bird of prey. He suddenly felt what it was like to be the prey itself, when 41 pairs of hungry, predatory eyes turned on him with a burning desire to be his undoing. Externally, he was the epitome of calm, but internally, a single thought crossed his mind. Well, shit. You have 15 minutes to form your groups. Once you have done so, please come to me so that you can be registered. Midnight smirked, cracking her cat-o' tails to kick off the exercise. The response was instantaneous. Izuku felt the tiniest bit of sadness when virtually every student ran away from him in their search to find or form a team. Of course, nobody would want to team up with the one person who had a target pinned to his back. He just hoped that. Midoriya. The phoenix visibly sighed with relief when Fumikage approached him. Let's team up together. Dark shadow emerged, burbs flocked together. Izuku nodded. Thank you. Now, let's see if we can find more people. Otherwise, I think we'll be doing this as a partnership. A small part of Fumikage, admittedly, wanted it to be a partnership. Partly because the name had a nice ring to it, And also because he was quite certain that everyone didn't want to be on the same team as Izuku due to the massive target that was the 10 million point headband. He was wrong. So, Mr. 10 million points. Izuku immediately recognized that voice. Ah, I believe you are Hatsum? The one who constantly puts my Jima-sensei through the mental ringer every day. That's me. A pink-haired girl decked out in support equipment gave them a winning, if also crazed smile. Hatsum Mei, future CEO of Hatsum Support Industries, at your service. She gave an exaggerated bow. I suppose your support inventions will join the light against the incoming darkness? Fumikage asked. That's right. Mei beamed, prompting an almost inaudible mutter from the raven-headed teen about the additional brightness. My babies will prove themselves to the world. Are you aware that by calling your inventions babies, people might get the wrong idea? Izuku asked. I am. I always find their expressions entertaining. The smile Mei now had was positively shit-eating. Oh, that's that. Which of your babies will you be using? These two. She tapped her clunky boot on the ground and gestured to the jetpack strapped to her back. Since we've got a flight aesthetic going on and all. But I can't fly, Fumikage pointed out. Well, then I've got nothing without being accidentally offensive, Mei shrugged. Suddenly, Midnight called out from her raised stage, everyone. You have 5 more minutes to form your teams. Also, since we have participants who are capable of flight, I would like to inform you all of a new rule that will be in place. You are allowed to fly, so long as it is within the boundaries of the field, and you don't remain airborne for more than 10 seconds at a time. Izuku looked around. He saw 6 teams of 4 and 3 teams of 5. There weren't any more stragglers looking for a team. Looks like we're going to be a team of 3, unless Dark Shadow is allowed to be our 4th member. We should ask Kayama-sensei, Fumikage suggested. Alright, in the meantime, let's discuss how we're going to go about this. In the end, Midnight allowed Team Izuku to include Dark Shadow as their 4th member, since there was literally no one else to fill the gap. After some further discussion, it was decided that Fumikage would be the rider, while Izuku, Mei, and Dark Shadow supported him. The teams were given their respective headbands, and as flag-off approached, took their positions around the perimeter of the field. Everyone remember our plan? Yes. Yep. Ye. Get ready, hell is about to break open. All teams to themselves in 3, 2, 1, go. Immediately, like a tidal wave of human formations, the other teams converged upon Team Izuku. The Phoenix could hear the sound of Shoto's ice, and Katsuki's war cries. With his hands occupied in supporting Fumikage, Izuku unleashed an arching stream of fire from his beak. The flames formed a protective barrier around his team, stopping the others from getting too close, lest they get burnt. Team Shoto and Katsuki, on the other hand, were unfazed. Shoto just used his ice to extinguish the flames, and Katsuki simply vaulted his team over with his explosions. Take flight, and remember your move, Shadow-chan. Aye, Captain. Mei's hoverboots and jetpack roared to life, and Izuku's wings unfurled. Before either Team Shoto or Katsuki could get any closer, Team Izuku was already airborne. The group flew over the 2 rival teams, and Dark Shadow swooped down like a raptor on its prey. While she wasn't able to grab Shoto or Katsuki's headbands, she did make away with 2 from Momo and Idru. Barely 10 seconds into the fray, and Team Midoriyas is already up to a strong start. Will the others be able to catch up? Good job, Shadow-chan. Izuku nodded as the team touched down and began moving. Incoming team to my left, Fumikage warned. It was a group of 4, ridden by one Minoma Nito. Repeat the maneuver. Hatsum, get ready. Got it? Team Izuku took off into the air, just out of Nito's reach. Hatsum cackled loudly, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke from her jetpack that fell over the pretentious blonde like a dense fog. Fumikage was able to rip Nito's headband off his head and another, and pass both to Dark Shadow, who immediately fused it into her shadowy form. Once again, Team Midoriyas is picking points like cherries. The other teams better step up their game soon. Izuku knew that such smoothness would not last. DKU. Team Bakugo coming in at 6 o'clock. Repeat maneuver. Despite the bloodthirsty look on the Pomeranian's face, he didn't even get close to Team Izuku before they were airborne again. This time, Izuku freed one hand and threw a fireball at his former childhood friend. As Katsuki reeled back from the fire, Dark Shadow took the opportunity to lunge at the explosive blonde. This time, she was able to snatch Katsuki's headband off his head and let out a victory screech that thankfully overshadowed the explosive blonde's own screech of fury. "Our target has just gotten bigger," Fumikage remarked, mostly to himself as his Quirk pocketed the headband. "But at least we're advertising my babies," Mei replied cheerfully. "Looks like we're going to have another opportunity right now," said Izuku, noticing Team Shoto turning their attention towards them. Team Shoto was upon them within seconds, helped by what Izuku guessed was a signature move on Tenya's part, honed and trained for many years. His team put up a fight, but thanks to Tenya's faster-than-normal speed and Shoto's reflexes, the bicolor-haired teen managed to rip the headband off of Izuku's head. And Todoroki Shoto steals the 10 million point headband from Team Midoriya. Present Mike was completely losing it. What an unexpected turn of events. And with only a minute left, can anyone turn this around? No one could have expected what happened next. "That's where you are wrong, Yamada-sensei," Izuku called out in his loudest voice. All movement and noise ceased at once. What do you mean, little listener?" Izuku turned to Shoto. "Look closer at the headband you just took." The son of Endeavor did so. His eyes widened the slightest bit. There was no 10 million printed in bold font and colors on the headband. It was only a measly 5. Izuku held up a headband in full display. "The real 10 million headband is right here, in my hand." There was a single full second of complete silence. The entire stadium was immediately on their feet. The other teams broke out of their stupor and raced towards Team Izuku, who didn't move an inch despite the 9 human formations surging straight at them. Izuku heard Katsuki screech that derogatory childhood name like a banshee, and Shoto's eyes have morphed into a manic level of determination only seen on individuals who have thrown all caution to the wind and desperation knew no bounds. But just as his team was capable of pulling off a sudden twist, they were capable of a second. Before any team could get within an arm's length, Izuku threw the headband into the air. The sudden act caused all movement to stop momentarily, which was long enough for the Phoenix to throw a fireball at the headband, causing the fabric to disintegrate into ashes, raining down over the quartet like dirty snowflakes. Again, silence befell the stadium. Dark Shadow decided to break it with as much subtlety as a gong that had just been hit, and 1 minute is up. Snapped out of his stupor, Present Mike hurriedly checked the timer that he had up in the commentator's box. Sure enough, there was no time left. The second round had come to an end, with the destruction of the 10 million points headband. Oh, talk about 2 unexpected twists of events. With that, the cavalry battle draws to a close. Pay attention to the standings. The screens around the stadiums listed as followed. First place, Team Midoriya. Second place, Team Todoroki. Third place, Team Shinso. Fourth place, Team Bakugo. Congrats to the top 4 teams. Don't worry to those who didn't make it, you will have another chance come next year. In the meantime, there are plenty of activities for you to keep yourself entertained until the end of the day. Aizawa interjected, for the top 4 teams, the final round will take place in 2 hours. Make sure to eat enough, because you will be pushed to your limits. And that was that. The teams disbanded and went off to do their own things for the next 2 hours. Team Izuku came out of formation. That was truly mad, the Dark would have been proud, Fumikage muttered. Thank you so much you guys. Mei was ecstatic, this will definitely catch the sponsor's attention. Izuku's stomach growled, hey, do you guys want to grab lunch now? Not for me. I've got to prepare my babies for the next round. See you. Mei waved to them before bouncing off to who knows where. I guess it's just the 2 of us then, said Fumikage, though he could hear Dark Shadow snickering inside him. Let's not dally, I'm pretty sure the queues are bonkers by now. There might be a stall for students only. Maybe, that actually would be Dash. Midoriya. Both stopped. Todoroki-kun? How may I help you? I would like to speak to you in private. Fumikage could feel Dark Shadow hiss protectively inside him. Will this take long? I need to have my lunch, and Recovery Girl requires my help. I'll try not to take too much of your time. Izuku turned to Fumikage. You go ahead first. Just grab something for me. Anything is fine. He turned back to Shoto. Lead the way. They found a quiet corridor near an obscure exit that led to the back of the stadium, away from the main hub of activity. Izuku and Shoto faced one another, on opposite walls, in a silence that was quickly becoming awkward and oppressive. What is it that you wanted to talk about? Shoto's eyes remained cool. You played me and my team good, Midoriya. That I will acknowledge. It was a tactic I'm sure many people can think of in such a situation, Izuku replied. Is there anything else? Yes, I've been observing you for a while. Izuku remained silent, expression carefully neutral. You caught my attention ever since the battle trials, Shoto continued. Even though you have a liberal use of fire, you are not like him. You are not arrogant, and despite your tendency for dramatics, you don't actively seek attention. Furthermore, you are a humanoid bird, and I have only seen you hang around with Tokoyami. Midoriya, I need to ask you this, and I want you to be honest with me. Izuku nodded. Are you the secret love child of both my parents and Hawks? What? You didn't answer my question. Izuku had to force down the sheer incredulity in order to respond. Todoroki-gun, where on earth did you come up with such an assumption? Just because I am a phoenix and have pyrokinetic abilities, that does not mean I am related to that flaming garbage can that you call a father. Izuku didn't notice it, but Shoto's eyes thawed just the slightest bit. You just appeared as such. I needed to know. The phoenix wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he continued. But anyways, are we done? One more thing, said Shoto. I suspect that in the final round, we will be pitted against one another. If we do meet at opposite ends of the field, I want you to give me your all. That I can do. But Todoroki-kun, didn't you tell me something similar earlier? Do you have something to prove? Shoto's eyes became dark. Have you heard about Quirk marriages? Immediately, the temperature plummeted. Izuku knew that what was about to be said was something he wasn't not going to enjoy hearing. He was right. Your parents are in a Quirk marriage, aren't they? Despite the fact such marriages have been outlawed for decades. Shoto's eyebrows furrowed. Do you know why my father has Endeavor as his hero name? All his life, he had longed to surpass All Might. He always wanted to be number one. But no matter what he did, All Might remained out of reach. Years after years of hearing people praise All Might's name, and never his, convinced him to do whatever means necessary to see his one-sided adversary taken down. Izuku remained silent. My mother came from a family that wasn't well off, but she had a quirk that Endeavor sought after to create the perfect heir. He paid her family ludicrously for her hand in marriage, and sired 4 children with her, me being the youngest. The first 3, Tia, Natsuo and Fuyumi, did not have the perfect quirk he desired, so they were cast aside to be raised by the servants. My birth changed everything. Endeavor finally had his heir that will surpass All Might in his name, and he was going to ensure that his masterpiece stayed on his predetermined path. Did he physically abuse you? He called it training. Shoto's voice had taken a dark tone, almost painful as the memories assaulted him. There isn't much to remember, since I was often beaten into unconsciousness. But what I do remember is my mother and Tuya trying to intervene, to convince Endeavor to have mercy. They paid dearly for it, especially when he used his quirk on them. Izuku hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, but he was sure the beginnings of nausea were forming in his stomach. I remember Tuya trying to get Endeavor's attention away from me, to him instead. I think he was trying to prove to that man that he could be what he always wanted to. He took to training his fire all by himself, but he often overdid, and Fuyumi was constantly patching up his burns. Then one day, he just disappeared. Ran away? I don't know. All I heard was that an entire hill was incinerated. The wildfire could be seen for miles around, and it took almost an entire day for heroes and firefighters to extinguish the flames. Endeavor always said that Tuya had died, but there was never a funeral, nor a body. Izuku could see the slight trembles running through Shoto's body, as if his classmate was holding back tears. As much as he wanted to hug Shoto, as he did for Fumikage after waking him up from the nightmare, he reasoned that Shoto might be adverse to contact from people he wasn't close to, especially given the thinly veiled physical abuse that he described going through. Tuya's disappearance was the tipping point for my mother, Shoto continued. I could literally see her crack and splinter as time passed. About a month passed about Tuya's disappearance. I found her in the kitchen, boiling a kettle of water. She was mumbling to herself, and she looked really disheveled. I didn't realize it at the time, but she had gone beyond the event horizon. The look of absolute insanity in her eyes, the twitches of her eyelids, her broken voice whispering how my left side was unsightly, how it only reminded her of the monster she was married to. That was immediately before she threw the boiling water over my left eye. Izuku flinched. That explained the scar. My mother was institutionalized, and till this day, I haven't seen her. Shoto sighed. Whatever sliver of emotion that managed to break through being roughly pushed behind his walls, things did not improve at home. With my mother and Tuya out of the way, Endeavor saw this as open season for more training sessions. From then on, I made a promise to never use the fire Endeavor has cursed me with. Today, I will show that bastard that my ice will be enough to win. I'll destroy his pride and ego with my victory alone. I'll prove to everyone watching that I am more than just Endeavor's son. Silence followed for a brief moment. What I wanted to say is, make sure to give me a good fight. Knowing our strengths, we will be facing each other on the battlefield. Help me prove to that bastard that fire will not hold me down. His fire has destroyed my family, but he will not destroy me. Shoto gave him a final nod, before turning on his heel and disappearing down the corridor where they'd come through previously. For about a minute, Izuku remained still, completely silent as he processed what he had just learnt. He let out a shaky breath, before he too went down the corridor, deep in thought. Did something happen? Fumikage asked worriedly when he noticed his friends sit down heavily beside him. A lot of things, Tokoyami, Izuku replied. It's honestly right out of a Korean drama plotline. How bad is it? True darkness exists in our world, and Todoroki has the misfortune of being caught up in it. Fumikage was silent, merely pushing an extra-large serving of katsudon to his friend. Izuku finished the meal in minutes, given how ravenous he had become. Pushing the empty bowl to one side to be picked up by one of the cleaning robots roaming around the grounds, he turned back to his friend. So anyway, I heard from Todoroki that we will be pitted against one another for the final round. That makes sense, since it would be illogical to have a second team event. Fumikage nodded. Who do you think you will be up against first? No clue, Izuku shrugged. I wouldn't put it past them to randomize the brackets. They enjoyed each other's silence for several moments. Fumikage checked his watch. We have about an hour before the break ends. Do you want to walk around the stalls? I would love to. The pair got up, and with only a centimeter of distance between them, they wandered around the carnival, occasionally spending some money to play games and winning prizes for their efforts. Inside Fumikage, Dark Shadow was squealing with bubbling joy. And we're back with the Yui Sports Festival. Did everyone have a good lunch break? The entire stadium roared its affirmative. Rockin'. Now, I hope everyone is up for more excitement, for we are progressing into the final round where our top 16 competitors will be facing off one another in one-on-one battles. As the stadium roared, inside one of tunnel leading out to the field, Izuku stood in quiet contemplation. His match was the first one, against Shinso Hitoshi from Class 1C. It was his opponent that submerged the Phoenix into deep thought. Earlier, just as he and Fumikage were returning from the carnival, and the brackets were announced, Mishira came up to him with a troubled look. He remembered their conversation. You're pulling out? Yes. I can't, in good conscience, continue when I did not put my full effort in the cavalry battle. It is against the honor I carry as a martial artist, and furthermore, I feel violated. He didn't even ask me if I wanted to be in his team. He just put me under his mind control when I turned around to acknowledge his presence. I couldn't snap out of it, and it was only when someone bumped into me at the end did I return to conscious action. What if he had nefarious intentions? He could have bodily violated me if it was in another scenario. Mishira took a moment to compose herself. Midoriya, I saw the brackets, and you're going to be up against him. Please teach him a lesson, and put him in his place. It would have been so easy. From what things were, it appeared that this Hitoshi relied heavily on his quirk to get this far. He probably didn't have much in the manner of physical training. Izuku knew he could easily win this round by drop-kicking him out of the park. But at the same time, there was more to this. A mind control quirk that was almost asking for some prejudiced bigot to label as villainous. Even though Izuku could easily see how someone with such a quirk would be unbelievably valuable in hero operations, the negative implications are also undeniable. Who knows how much suffering Hitoshi must have gone through across his lifetime simply for pulling his straw in the genetic lottery. And furthermore, Hitoshi sounded like he really wanted to be in the heroics department, but a mind control quirk is effectively useless against giant robots, thereby relegating him to general education. If Izuku wanted to play devil's advocate, it would appear that Hitoshi was doing whatever he could to succeed in the sports festival to clinch that rare chance to be transferred into the heroics department, even risking his social standing with his cohort if it meant getting in. Izuku wondered just how he was going to go about tackling this issue. The metal doors in front of him rumbled and began to open, presenting to you all the flaming chicken whose dance moves rival that of Jilo and Bean, Midoriya Izuku from Class 1A. With the crowd cheering and bursts of flames rising up from hidden jets at his end of the field, Izuku stepped out into the open and took his position. Across from him, another set of metal doors opened with a rumble. He will be facing off against one of only 2 general education students to make it to the final round, Shinso Hitoshi from Class 1C. Sheesh, those eye bags really can't be healthy, Izuku thought to himself. Hitoshi was taller than him by about 10 centimeters, but Izuku had him beat in muscle size and mass. His almost bored-looking expression was almost successful in hiding the sheer determination to beat his opponent and move up to the next bracket. But Izuku had his own plan in the works. Midnight raised her cottontails, give the audience a clean match. Begin. Izuku strode over towards Hitoshi, who started drawling, impressive speech you gave, I'll acknowledge that. Pity though, this is coming from someone who had everything handed to you on a silver platter. I would have taken you more seriously if otherwise. His quirk must be voice activating. He's obviously trying to rouse me to snap back. Do you realize how pretentious you sound, claiming to know the struggles of those with villainous quirks when yours is already so flashy, powerful, and best suited for a hero? Izuku continued to remain silent, his strides undeterred. Around them, people started to whisper about what was going on. The entire scene was microphoned, meaning what was being said was broadcasted live to everyone watching. I bet that you never once had to face real struggle, Hitoshi snorted, trying to mask the rising desperation in his throat. You never knew what it was like to be treated like some kind of villain. I bet you are the popular kid with adoring fans, praising you for your powerful, useful quirk. Again, Izuku stayed silent, expression carefully neutral. The closer he got, the more frantic Hitoshi became. Did you even have to take the entrance exam? I bet you just threw money around until Yui accepted you into the heroics department, didn't you? After all, you are the perfect hero wannabe, I bet you dash. Hitoshi never got to say anything else, for Izuku pounced onto him and wrapped him in a tight hug with his arms and wings. Someone with a cricket quirk must have been in the audience, given the rhythmic sound of the iconic chirps that followed. It took a full 5 seconds for Hitoshi to process his current predicament. What are you doing? Let go of me. Promise me, for a hot second, that you won't take control of my mind? Hitoshi flinched. Now he knew why his opponent didn't say anything. The Phoenix knew his quirk all along. I'll take that as a yes. As for what I am doing, I am giving you a hug, because you seem like you desperately need one. Hitoshi wanted to protest, do something to get out of his current cage. But first, Izuku was strong. Second, his wings made the possibility of escape impossible. Third, he truly did want a hug. No one has hugged him since his quirk came at age 4, and the feeling of warm protection was nice. Let me fill you and everyone watching in on a story. Hitoshi slackened. I have been what I currently am for about a year. For 15 years, I was a human. A completely ordinary human with a dormant quirk factor. For 15 years, I was effectively quirkless. The cricket chirps were back again. Are you serious? Why would I lie in front of the entire country? Izuku asked rhetorically, I have nothing to gain from lying. Hitoshi's lips trembled. You were quirkless, so you were bullied? Physically, verbally, emotionally, and mentally abused? Told I was useless, not worthy enough to breathe the same air as the superior quirked people? Ignored by authority figures who actively took part in the torment? Told to kill myself in the hopes of getting a quirk in my next life by my childhood friend who developed an ego the size of Jupiter and also became a quirkist bigot? Yes, all of the boxes were ticked. Hitoshi was now speechless, a stark contrast to the spectators who were either confused, shocked, horrified, or outraged. Noise began to build up, when Izuku continuing his spiel got everyone to shut up. You've always wanted to be a hero, didn't you, Shinso-kun? Well, a top pro hero told me, right to my face, that I couldn't become a hero because of my dormant quirk. He called me a liability to my face, before leaving me on a rooftop to skedaddle off to God knows where. So what did I do? I went to the ledge and threw myself off. For the third time, the cricket chirps filled the dead silence. When my body hit the ground, that was when my quirk factor activated. Death was the trigger, which is actually poetic, given how I was technically reborn as a humanoid phoenix. Izuku chuckled, before returning to the serious tone. Shinso-kun, I won't discount that you went through tough times yourself. It is undeniable and inevitable that people will immediately think the worst of you, or whatever terrible crime you are capable of, when they learn that you have a mind control quirk that is voice activated. But at the same time, no quirk is villainous. Something the Pro Hero 13 told us just before my class was attacked at the USJ was that a quirk can be used for good and evil. Even me, my quirk caused the deaths of 51 villains at the USJ, all in the name of protecting my classmates and teacher. Does that make me no better than a villain? It depends on the person, but what matters is the purpose of one's quirk. As quoting my homeroom teacher, you, Shinso Hitoshi, have great potential as a hero. It was just bad luck that the entrance exam is extremely biased towards combative quirks, which Principal Nizu, I hope you're watching this, because we need to have a serious conversation about overhauling the entrance exam. In most cases, such a call-out would have ended awkwardly, since it was extremely unlikely that the subject would have heard it. No one, except for the staff, Izuku and Fumikage, could have expected all of the overhead screens to suddenly broadcast a live feed from the mammal's office, with the principal himself at the center of focus. I hear you loud and clear, Izuku-kun. Swing by my office next Monday, and we can brainstorm ideas. Up in the commentator's box, Aizawa was torn between relief and dread. He had long pushed for the entrance exam to be more inclusive to non-combative quirks, but at the same time, he feared what his student and Nizu were going to create from the recesses of their dangerous minds, mainly because the education board had always blocked attempts by Nizu and the staff to reform the entrance exam in the past. If the Phoenix and Chimera had their way, Aizawa couldn't guarantee the safety of the board members in the future. Thanks, Principal Nizu. Now where was I? Oh yes, 2 more things, Shinso-kun. No one expected the insomniac to get bitch-slapped, the impact reverberating through the silent stadium. That's for putting my classmate, Ojiro Mishira, under your mind control without her consent during the cavalry battle earlier. Izuku's tone became admonishing. I understand that you may have wanted to keep your quirk a secret, but that does not mean you can just use your quirk on her without the basic decency of asking for permission. If you're going to be a hero, manners and communication are part of the underlying foundation. People will be afraid to work or interact with you if they do not know when you are going to use your quirk. Have some consideration for your fellows, and your path to heroism will be much smoother. Understand? Still reeling from the unexpected slap, Hitoshi nodded. Good. After this is over, I want you to personally apologize to Ojiro-san and seek her forgiveness. By clearing this up, your relationship with her and my classmates will be a lot more smoother when the time comes. It took a moment for Hitoshi to register the last part of what his opponent said. What do you mean? My homeroom teacher expelled it. Pervert with grapes for hair on the first day of school for unsavory behavior towards my female classmates, Izuku explained. That means we have an empty spot in 1A. And when I said that you have potential to be a hero, I mean it. The Phoenix looked up to one of the screens. Principal Nizu, do you hear me? I want Shinso Hitoshi in my class by next Monday. The entire stadium exploded in shocked noises. The volume went up several notches when Nizu winked. I'm fast-tracking the transfer paperwork as we speak, Izuku. Consider your request fulfilled and effective immediately. Amidst the unfolding chaos, Izuku turned back to Hitoshi, who was gaping like a fish and making unintelligible noises. Shinso Hitoshi, it is my greatest honor to welcome you into the Yui Heroics course. Come, this is your Hero Academia. The stadium speakers suddenly started blaring congratulatory orchestral music on their own accord. Hitoshi's legs gave out, prompting Izuku to catch his blubbing opponent before he faceplants on the concrete field. The spectators were going crazy, as were the press who were greedily lapping up the scene for tomorrow's headlines. Impervious to the noise around him, Izuku gently soothed a sobbing Hitoshi, the latter thanking him profusely. Holy shit! What an unexpected twist! Truly a roller coaster of emotions. I am absolutely at a loss for words. It took several minutes for midnight to reign in the spectators. Indeed, it is truly a delectable scene that we all have just witnessed. However, the show must go on, Midoriya-kun. Your classmates still have their performances, after all? Sorry, Kiyama-sensei. I won't hold up the others any longer. Izuku suddenly picked Hitoshi up and lifted him over his head. Ready, Shinso-kun? What are you doing? Izuku just grinned cheekily, this bitch empty. YT. And tossed his opponent right out of the field. A great roar of laughter erupted. Present Mike literally fell out of his seat, his uncontrollable guffawing echoing through the speakers. Up in the seating gallery allocated to 1A, Denki, Hanta and Mina all pressed their hands together as if praying, got down to their knees, and thanked the heavens above for gracing them the sight of a budding meme lord making his debut. Even Hitoshi, despite hitting the ground considerably hard, was impressed. I see that you are a man, no, phoenix, of culture. Izuku was already rushing over as he said this, ignoring Midnight declaring his victory. I just thought that it was fitting. Now, let's get you to recovery, girl. I hope I didn't break any of your bones from throwing you. Hitoshi huffed, nah, you didn't. This isn't the worst that's happened to me. Immediately, Izuku went still, though Hitoshi failed to notice this. The phoenix eventually moved again, and helped his opponent to his feet. They vacate the field in seemingly comfortable silence, a facade that hid the hurricane of thoughts blowing through Izuku's mind. Not the worst thing that happened to him? Despite being thrown a considerable distance? Red flags were being raised. He needed to speak to Aizawa and Nizu after this. No broken bones, Recovery Girl concluded, just some very minor scrapes, a kiss would suffice. The Medi-heroine administered the kiss, and whatever injuries Hitoshi sustained from being yeeted across the field healed up in an instant. He received a couple of gummies for the trouble, and sent on his way. Aren't you coming? He asked Izuku, who remained where he was. Nope, I'm Recovery Girl's assistant for the day, the Phoenix replied. We are expecting quite a number of injuries soon, so she wants me to help her heal whoever comes in after their fight to the death. You can heal people? Hitoshi was impressed. Is this the universe's apology for making your life so fucked up? Language, Recovery Girl admonished. One could see it that way. Izuku shrugged. Hurry along, head up to where 1A is sitting. For the first time in a long while, a genuine smile formed itself on Hitoshi's lips. Thank you. Is it okay if I speak to my 1C classmates first? I can't stop you even if I wanted to, Izuku said. Go on, you're gonna miss the other battles. With a final wave, Hitoshi left the infirmary. You did an immense solid for Shinso-kun, Recovery Girl remarked. I remember treating him after the entrance exam, and he was completely sullen. He knew right away that he wouldn't get into the heroics department. So to see him so happy, it warms my old heart. Izuku nodded, then he remembered what his opponent had said on the field. Recovery Girl, I'm almost certain that Shinso-kun had been bullied in past, but I also suspect that he has been physically abused before. What do you mean, Midoriya-kun? When I tossed him out of the field, I asked him if he was hurt anywhere. He told me that that was not the worst thing that has happened to him. Recovery Girl's lips thinned. That is concerning. I will do some digging, and I will inform Aizawa-kun and Nizu about this. You have reassurance? Izuku nodded. just as knocking came from the door. It opened, and Fumikage stepped inside. Tokoyami-kun? What are you doing here? Dark Shadow suddenly emerged. Fumi wanted to congratulate you on winning. Also, he wants a hug too. The raven-headed student hid his face in his hand. Dark Shadow, have some decorum, please. Izuku noticed that his friend didn't deny the statement. He got up and went over to Fumikage, wrapping the shorter teen in a hug, wings included. Dark Shadow cooed adorably, joining the hug without hesitation. Recovery Girl watched on with a small smile, always happy to see the younger generation looking out for one another. Do you want me to let go? Just a few more moments, Fumikage replied. You feel really warm. It soothes my cold insides. Izuku obliged. After the requested moments passed, Izuku let go. Congrats on moving on to the next bracket, said Fumikage, but I don't understand the meaning of your loud battle cry at the end. The smile on Izuku's beak became devious. He turned to Recovery Girl. Can Tokoyami-kun stay here with me? He can, so long as he doesn't disturb you when you're healing the competitors. Izuku turned back to Fumikage. Sit by me. Let me introduce you and Shadow-chan to the wondrous world of memes. The sports festival continues. Hanta was up against Shoto, and it was no contest. An iceberg kicks the human tape dispenser out. It was over the top, unnecessary, and it only reinforced what the son of Endeavor told Izuku in that quiet corridor. The camera broadcasted Shoto thawing his opponent out, a conflicted look souring his handsome features. Izuku's healing flames helped to warm Hanta up and prevent any complications from the sudden lowering of his body temperature. Recovery Girl gave him a kiss to be on the safe side, and sent him back to the stands with some gummies. The next match pitted Denki against a student from 1B, Shiozaki Ibara. The references and allusions to Jesus Christ and Christianity were not lost on Izuku. Again, it was a no contest. Denki foolishly thought he could take out Ibara with his signature move of 1,000,000 volts. He never considered that electricity would have no effect on plant matter. Ibara used her hair, which were made of strong, thorny vines of which she had good control over, to form a shield around her body to protect herself from the electricity. With Denki reduced to drooling, stupefied mess, Ibara easily threw him out of the field with her vines, declaring her victory. Denki was wheeled into the infirmary, still making those funny noises. Izuku had his classmate laid down on one of the beds. A combination of his flames and Recovery Girl's kiss sent the electric Quirk teen to sleep, of which he woke up just after the next bracket. Mei's match against Tenya was absolutely hilarious. Essentially, it was a cat-and-mouse chase with Tenya fitted out with a selection of Mei's inventions. While the bespectacled student chased her around the field, Mei was excitedly giving a pitch presentation to the dozens of support heroes and representatives in the audience, which close-ups showed expressions of curiosity and intrigue. In the end, Mei had Tenya catapulted out of bounds with what appeared to be a launcher that fired a boxing glove propelled by an inbuilt rocket. At this point, Fumikage left the infirmary. His match was next, and he was up against Mina. This time, there was no fooling around or one-shot KOs. Both had the same magnitude of power, and they were determined to advance. Upon flag-off, Mina made the first move. She sent a wall of acid straight towards Fumikage, who rolled out of the way in time. He got back up and charged towards his opponent, Dark Shadow out as a second means of attack. It quickly became a mix of dodgeball and tag, Mina firing shots of acid while Fumikage and Dark Shadow dodged and shot back with their own melee attacks. While Fumikage was occasionally hit by the acid, most ended up on the concrete field. As the match dragged on, more acid was spilt. Then, everything came to a sudden end when Dark Shadow grabbed Mina and pushed her away. Her shoes slipped on the acid, and like a bar of soap sliding across the floor, she skidded away from Fumikage and out of bounds. It was an unexpected conclusion, hardly anyone saw it coming. It took midnight declaring Fumicage's victory to get the audience up to speed. Mina was disappointed at her loss, but she pushed it aside for a smile, congratulating her opponents and heading back up to the 1A seating gallery. Fumikage returned to the infirmary where Izuku was waiting with his own congratulations and healing powers at the ready. Izuku was more than willing to continue his impromptu lesson about memes with Fumikage, had it not been for the subsequent match with a lineup that warranted his close attention. Momo was up against Katsuki. Momo knew that her opponent was strong. Anyone who could create sizable explosions from their palms was a formidable opponent. And while she did have some questions on why this Bakugo Katsuki was not in the heroics department despite his strong quirk, Momo quickly pushed any confusion to the back of her mind. Her match was due to begin at any moment, and she needed to some strategizing. From what she observed of Bakugo during the obstacle race and cavalry battle, the blonde's personality matched his quirk. He was quick to anger and has no knowledge on restraint. Momo knew that Bakugo would waste no time in attacking her, meaning that she would have to be quick on her feet and quirk if she wanted to stand her ground. The metal doors before her rumbled and opened. Presenting to all, the all-round creator of 1A, Yaoyorozu Momo. Steadying her breathing, she stepped out into the light and made her way towards the field. Across from her, the second set of doors rumbled open. She'll be facing off against the only remaining general education student left in the finals, Bakugo Katsuki from 1C. Yep, Momo thought to herself, as the aforementioned blonde stepped out with a look of ravenous murder on his face. She needed to be fast, otherwise she won't survive. Midnight raised her cattails. This better be a clean match, otherwise there will be hell to pay. So, begin. Dai-ai. Bakugo screamed, palms igniting as his explosions propelled him straight towards Momo, who just got out of the way before she could be hit. Okay Momo, be quick on this, what can stop or inhibit explosions? She dodged another set of fireballs. Fucking fight me, you pussy. Momo scowled. Oh, she most definitely will. As Bakugo rebounded and prepared for another attack, Momo took a leap of faith, charged forward, and from her hand, produced a yellowish liquid that was somewhat viscous. It splashed all over Bakugo's hands, and as he spluttered, which Momo took advantage of to douse him with more of the liquid. Now, in most situations, the explosive blonde would have continued on unimpeded. But when a good portion of the liquid fell over his face, everything changed. He couldn't breathe. The liquid had gotten into his nose and covered his mouth, cutting off the flow of oxygen. His lungs screamed with increased heat, his brain running haywire like a derailing train. All he could think of was slime, more and more slime, pushing and forcing itself into his body despite his attempts at resistance. In a split second, fear began to take hold, and when Bakugo experienced fear, he released his explosions. Even as his body was covered in motor oil, a flammable liquid that required only a single spark to ignite. The stadium shook with a deafening boom, followed by Bakugo's unholy screams. Everyone watching live and through their screens blanched in horror as the blonde was engulfed in flames. It was a morbid sight. Bakugo flailed and danced like a puppet gone crazy, desperately trying to put out the fire eating away at his body. Momo immediately sprang into action. As quickly as she could, she unzipped her gym top to open enough skin to create a dry chemical fire extinguisher. She tried to get close enough to activate the nozzle, only to be thrown back when Bakugo unintentionally ignited an explosion that fueled the flames. As Midnight called the match off and screamed for emergency help, Momo tried again. Grabbing the fire extinguisher, she got close enough, unpinned the canister, and began spraying her burning opponent. It took 20 seconds for the flames to die down, revealing a gruesome sight for everyone to see. In the infirmary, Recovery Girl was already activating the Medibots as soon as Katsuki went up in flames. Izuku and Fumikage were frozen stiff, unable to tear their widened eyes and slackened beaks away from the morbid sight of the blonde being burnt alive. The live feed was suddenly cut, preventing the two avians from seeing the aftermath. Less than a minute later, the Medibots returned with Katsuki on a stretcher. Immediately, the smell of burnt flesh, nitroglycerin and motor oil filled the room, as the extent of the damage became clear. Katsuki had third-degree burns covering virtually his entire body. His hair had been burnt away, and his breathing was shallow, bordering on non-existent. His body was bleeding heavily, staining the white fabric of the stretcher a dark crimson. Fumikage immediately became nauseous, running towards the nearest bin to puke up his stomach. Izuku was frozen, staring in horrified awe at the state of his childhood friend-turned-bully. Even though he hated Katsuki with all his guts, never in his life had he wanted for the blonde to suffer such inhumane pain as he was undoubtedly going through right now. Recovery Girl was already having Katsuki moved onto a bed, her voice snapping Izuku out of his stupor. "Midoriya, get over here." Izuku rushed over, as the Medi-heroine administered a sedative to numb Katsuki. Once that was done, the Phoenix placed his hands over the burnt flesh and activated his healing flames. It would take a full 3 minutes for Izuku's power to restore everything that had been marred and destroyed. There was nothing he could do about Katsuki's hair. It would have to grow back on its own. At least, though, the blonde was no longer at death's door. Fumikage returned, looking slightly the worse for wear. Recovery Girl immediately gave him a kiss and some gummies to replenish his energy. Izuku stumbled back onto the adjacent bed, still reeling from what they all just went through. "I can't." Recovery Girl came over with another handful of gummies. "You did what you needed to do. He'll be fine." Izuku accepted the candy and consumed them at one go. Fumikage and Dark Shadow were immediately at the Phoenix's side, hugging him as a show of support. Within 30 seconds, footsteps rushed towards the infirmary, and the doors burst open. "How is he?" "Yamada, keep your volume down." Recovery Girl came up to the two men. "Aizawa-kun, Yamada-kun, young Bakugo will be fine. Midoriya's healing powers reversed the damage. All that we can do now is to let him rest." Present Mike visibly relaxed. Even though Bakugo Katsuki was one of the most problematic teenagers he ever had to teach, he was still his student, after all. His well-being remained a top priority. Izuku turned around. "Yamada-sensei, what's going on now?" Aizawa took over. "The entire program has been halted temporarily. Now that we know that Bakugo is out of harm's way, we should be able to continue." "What about Yaoyorozu-san?" "She's with Kiyama," Aizawa replied. "Honestly, I'm not sure if she wants to continue." Even though the match was called off, Yaoyorozu would have advanced by default. But it's her decision if she wants to proceed or not. The conversation then shifted. "How are you feeling, Midoriya?" He turned back to the unconscious form of his bully. "I think I need a moment to clear my head. Probably get a drink or something." "You'll have about half an hour," Aizawa replied. "Your match against Todoroki will be next." "Understood, sensei." "Midoriya, do you want me to come with you?" Fumikage offered. "I would appreciate your company." Aizawa and Present Mike parted ways to allow the two teens to leave. When the door closed behind them, Recovery Girl sighed. "I wish they never had to see that." "Unfortunately, this is part and parcel of heroics," Aizawa replied grimly. "At least, we should thank the heavens that Midoriya has healing capabilities. This could have gone so much worse. I hated him. I truly did. But I never thought that things would end up like this." Fumikage silently nodded, playing the role of the listening ear as Izuku verbalized his inner turmoil. The pair had stopped by a vending machine, and Izuku got a soda for himself. They walked down an empty corridor, away from prying eyes. He was worse than a bully. He was a monster, a villain I should say. Yet why am I so affected by his misfortune? "This time," Fumikage spoke, "I think it's because you have a history with him. If I remember correctly, you were friends for 4 years, before things changed with his quirk. As much as I agree that Bakugo is a textbook example of one of the worst kinds of humans, it would be too simplistic just to say that you hate him. Would it be wrong for me to say that a tiny part of you wishes that you could still be friends with him?" "No, you would be correct," Izuku replied, finishing his soda and tossing the can into a bin. "And I guess it is the natural level of compassion that most people would have for the suffering of others." "Bakugo doesn't deserve your compassion," Fumikage replied. "He doesn't," Izuku agreed, "but compassion in of itself is an emotion. It doesn't discriminate when someone else is suffering." Fumikage would have voiced his agreement of such a statement, when heavy footsteps approached them. Suddenly, the air became a lot hotter, and it wasn't due to Izuku. "I've been looking for you." This was no clearer an example of an emotional whiplash. One moment, Izuku was coming to terms with his emotions pertaining to Katsuki's fiery and painful end of his journey in the sports festival. The next, he and Fumikage were face-to-chest with the number 2 hero, Endeavor, himself. The towering man was putting on an intimidation game, his signature flames burning brightly over his face and hero costume. Unbeknownst to the bastard, however, Izuku was too caught up in the memory of what Shoto told him earlier to be intimidated. In fact, it seemed to remove his brain-to-mouth filter altogether. "What is it, Enduhor?" Fumikage whipped his head towards his friend. "What did you just call me?" Despite the flames intensifying, Izuku remained steadfast. "Are you deaf? I called you Enduhor. That's your name, I presume?" The man literally growled, "Listen here, boy. I'm a pro-hero and I demand respect? Reverence? Adoration? Sorry, but if you are expecting any of those 3 from me, you have chosen the wrong person. After all, why would I respect or adore a domestic abuser?" Despite the heat from both man and Phoenix, the temperature in the corridor dropped. "You don't know what you are talking about, boy. Strange, since it was Shoto who told me everything that you did to him and your family. Shoto is only being rebellious, he Rebellious? No, I think Shoto is far from rebellious, given how you were the indirect cause of his scar, your wife's descent into insanity and Fortuya's supposed death." The mention of his eldest child's name seemed to stun Endeavor, which gave Izuku the opening he needed to continue his increasingly hostile spiel. "I already had many misgivings about you, Endeavor. Your astronomical collateral damage in villain fights, the numbers of innocent lives lost to your reckless negligence, and your stunning attitude towards civilians. But when I heard that you forced your wife into an illegal Quirk marriage, physically abused her and your children, caused one of them to allegedly die and dealt potentially irrevocable trauma to the rest of your family, all for your fucked-up goal for a title that you will never achieve, the mantle of hero no longer applies to you. How you got your license, only the heavens know. But what is undeniably clear is that you are a disgusting, abhorrent and vile example of the worst of humanity. Yes, Enduhor, I am calling you, right to your nasty face, nothing more than a motherfucking villain." The flames exploded. "You insolent brat!" Fumikage cried out, and Dark Shadow emerged to protect Izuku from the incoming fist. Let it be known that in many documented cases, adrenaline can cause people to perform unimaginable feats or acts of strength. Not only did Izuku stop Endeavor's fist with nothing but a hand, he pushed it away, grabbed the man's body, and drove his knee right into his groin. Also, let it be known that many male pro-heroes, in their bias and overdependence on their quirks, never include any protection for their family jewels in the design of their outfits. Endeavor was one of them. Izuku felt something. No, something's burst on his knee. There was a moment of silence, before it ended by Endeavor producing a high-pitched squeal of agonizing pain. Izuku got out of the way, just as the man crashed onto the ground, hands grasping his crotch. For the second time in less than an hour, Fumikage was left stupefied. Dark Shadow's beak had fallen open, matching her host's look of abject horror at the horrific brutality before them. "Midoriya? Tokoyami, go get Recovery Girl. Tell her that Endeavor suffered a medical emergency and requires immediate treatment." The raven-haired teen, understandably, stared at his friend with absolute incredulity, as if the Phoenix hadn't just committed a violation of the so-called bro code on the number 2 hero. "Just go. I'll handle the fallout." Slowly, Fumikage got his legs moving and hurried down the corridor. As Endeavor continued to whimper, Izuku noticed a security camera nearby. "Principal Nizu, if you are watching, can you make the camera nod?" The camera nodded immediately. "Can you please cover for me? He tried to attack me first, and I was only protecting myself from harm." It nodded again. "Thank you, Principal." To his surprise, the camera produced a little robotic arm and gave him an okay gesture. It had just retreated back into the main body when footsteps rushed towards the scene. "Midoriya!" Recovery Girl called out in between breaths. She really was getting on with age. "What happened?" Izuku pointed at the trembling man on the floor. "Endeavor tried to assault me for saying things he didn't like to hear. I need his crotch in self-defense, and his family jewels ruptured." The silence was back again, save for Endeavor's whimpering. "What? I effectively destroyed Endeavor's sperm tanks while defending myself from his physical assault," Izuku replied simply. I believe he requires immediate medical treatment, otherwise his manliness will be irrevocably ruined and he will never be able to have children again, though that second one sounds really appealing. A perturbed recovery girl eventually dispatched the Medibots to bring over an extra-large stretcher to wheel the number 2 hero to the infirmary. Izuku watched with an amused glint in his eyes as Endeavor was carted away like a sniveling idiot. Fumikage turned to him, worry overriding his previous stupor. Midoriya, this is Endeavor. He could literally destroy your life once he is treated. And I don't give a flying fuck, Izuku replied immediately. He tried to assault me first, and Principal Nizu has it covered. He pointed to that same security camera. Attacking a UE student simply for enacting his right to freedom of speech will be a public relations nightmare for Endeavor. If that abusive bastard has any brains inside his skull, he won't push the matter. Fumikage did see the logic in that. Come on, I want to check on Bakugo before my match with Todoroki later. Shoto didn't know what was going on. As he headed down to the field for his match, he heard all manner of whispering about his father. Apparently he had been taken to the infirmary because of some injury he sustained. What injury exactly? The whisperings he heard presented all kinds of theories, but nothing conclusive. Either way, despite the fact that Shoto knew that Endeavor was in the stadium, he hadn't seen him once since the festival started. Not that the dual Quirk teen wasn't appreciative of such circumstances. The less time he spent in that bastard's presence, the better. Anyway, now wasn't the time to think about Endeavor. He had a match to win, and a promise to uphold. Across the stadium behind his own set of doors, Izuku was in the midst of his own thinking. Katsuki had stabilized, put into a medically induced coma by recovery girl as a precaution as she checked for any remaining signs of damage. On a different note, her quirk apparently wasn't able to completely heal the loss of Endeavor's manliness, and she had already called for an ambulance from the Muzutafu General Hospital to pick up the flaming turd for possible further treatment. At the same time, he learned that Momo had decided to withdraw from the tournament. Izuku couldn't blame her. Seeing someone being burnt alive with their own eyes was a nightmare that promised untold trauma. It was a sensible act on Aizawa's part to send Momo straight to Hound Dog. It was a start until further arrangements for additional therapy sessions could be made. All that aside, back at the upcoming match, Izuku never forgot about what Shoto told him. No doubt his classmate was only going to use his ice, which could only spell trouble if he continuously used it. His body was made for ice and fire, and both were supposed to balance the other out. If Shoto only used ice, frostbite and hypothermia were bound to follow. Izuku knew he had to intervene quickly. They already had a casualty in the form of Katsuki. He couldn't, in good conscience, let another one fall victim. The doors on both sides of the stadium began to open. Presenting to you all, the flaming chicken who has flown his way to victory thus far, Midoriya Izuku of 1A. Izuku released a breath and strode out towards the field. He will be facing off the Ice King of 1A and the son of Endeavor, Todoroki Shoto. Shoto took his place at the other end of the field. Fire versus ice. Who will win? Only this battle will tell. Take it away, Kiyama. Midnight raised her cat-o'-nine tails, just as she did for all the battles thus far. You two better have a clean match, or you will face punishments. Begin. Immediately, just as he had done to Hanta previously, Shoto unleashed a wall of ice in an attempt to freeze Izuku into submission. Of course, the Phoenix retaliated with his flames that melted the ice in seconds. Shoto was unperturbed and charged forward to get a close-up attack on his opponent. Izuku took to the air and threw several fireballs at Shoto, forcing him to retreat to not get burned. It quickly became a volley of attacks, one after another. Fire and ice clashed, and the atmosphere almost became akin to a tennis match with the ball being propelled back and forth. Hey. This is getting really boring already. Hype up the action, will ya? Yamada-sensei, that's the worst thing you could possibly say. Shoto clearly saw the voice hero's words as a challenge. The ice came even stronger and harder. Izuku forced himself into aerial acrobatics to get out of the way of icicles and icebergs that threatened to turn him into either kebabs or frozen chicken. This, naturally, caused Shoto's body temperature to rapidly fall the longer he continued such attacks. Dodging another icicle, Izuku cursed under his breath. Shit! His right side is freezing up. Ice had begun to form on Shoto's right half, inhibiting his movement. As the minutes progressed, Shoto's attacks became sloppier, some even missing Izuku altogether despite the phoenix not moving at all. His breath came out in frosted fogs, and his body was trembling violently. This was when Izuku knew that he had to intervene. Todoroki, you're overusing your ice. Please, don't do this to yourself. Use your fire. Shoto's breath hitched. For a moment, all was silent. Did that bastard pay you to say that? Did he pay you to trample on the hope I had that you will be no different than him? What Izuku said next would tip the first domino in a long chain of events spanning beyond the sports festival. Not that he would ever regret it in hindsight. Why on earth would Endeavor buy me out when I literally castrated him earlier? Everything screeched to a halt. The cricket chirps were back again. Shoto was certain that he had heard wrong. Izuku didn't care that his bombshell was broadcasted live for the entire country to hear. He didn't care that this was a sanctioned battle to the death for an audience to satisfy their lust for blood and quirks. He didn't care that the unfolding scene looked right out of shounen anime. He needed to get to Shoto. Earlier, Endeavor sought me out. Before he could spew whatever garbage he had from his mouth, I called him an whore right to his face. I took his hero name, Bastardisted, and threw it at his feet like spittle. Izuku slowly approached Shoto, who made no move in return. I called him out for every single crime he has committed. The Quirk marriage, the physical abuse, the horrendous treatment that drove your mother insane and thereby giving you your scar. I called him ashamed to the name of heroism. I declared, right to his fucking face, that he was nothing but a villain. Whispers began circulating amongst the spectators. The press had their cameras aimed at Izuku, eagerly lapping up the salacious intel that would make headlines for a heaven knows length of time. He tried to assault me, punch my head in. But I never gave him the chance. I drove my knee into his crotch. I felt two important parts of the male anatomy burst, and he went down, squealing like a pig about to be slaughtered. The dam broke. People shot to their feet, shouting over one another. Present Mike had found his voice and was adding to the rising furor. Izuku simply raised his hand for silence, and that was what he got. He wasn't done. Last I heard, he was sent to Muzutafu General Hospital because not even Recovery Girl could fully heal his ruined manliness. He won't be bothering you for a while, at least. But enough about him. Izuku reached Shoto, and in a move that surprised everyone, he hugged his opponent. Shoto, pun not intended, was frozen. Nobody, other than Fuyumi and his mother, has ever hugged him. He didn't know what to do. The sensations from being hugged by a mere acquaintance was foreign, and his freezing brain could not process what was happening to him. You went through hell and back because of Endeavor, and I can sympathize. As you probably heard from my match with Shinso-kun, I too was abused by people who were supposed to look out for me. I know what it is like to be beaten all the time, and the burning desire for vengeance against those who wronged you. You are entitled to avenge yourself, but please, don't do it at the cost of your body. Izuku wrapped his wings around Shoto. I know that Endeavor used fire to hurt and abuse you, but by suppressing your left side, you are playing right into his hands. He will continue to see this as a justification to hurt you more. By embracing the fire in you and using it to save not just others, but yourself, that is the biggest fuck you can give to that piece of animal shit that is your sperm donor. The hug tightened, Izuku's flames unconsciously melting the ice and warming Shoto's body. Shoto, I say this with all of my heart, the fire is yours. It's your power. As long as it is a part of you, it is yours. A memory surfaced, one repressed from years of abuse and torment. A quiet moment, a brief reprieve while Endeavor was out of town on duty, where a mother and her youngest child could watch videos of All Might without the threat of the monster harming them for bringing such sacrilege to his domain. The mother stroked her youngest dual-colored hair, smiling at his childlike awe for the symbol of peace and a desire to be like him someday. Her words echoed, almost eerily, with Izuku's own. You are not a prisoner of your blood, Shoto. You are the one to write your own story. For years he had repressed his emotions, seeing them as nothing more than weakness and as an excuse for Endeavor to continue beating him. But the warm hug, the soothing words, and the sheer relief that someone had taken down his worst enemy completely destroyed the walls he built around his heart. Like a dam collapsing and a tsunami of water surging out, the tears fell, steam rose, and embers began to form. With a loud, pained cry, Todoroki Shoto ignited. It was a conflagration, akin to a wildfire that destroyed lush greens. The people were shouting again, losing their minds at the sudden turn of events. Izuku did not pull away, his beak upturned in a smile as the flames danced around him and his opponent. Why would you go so far? You deserve to be saved, Shoto. Heroes need saving too. With all of his emotions spilling out of him, Shoto began to sag. Izuku kept him steady. You're insane. Do you know that? I'm very much aware. A hero's duty is to do the insane. I'm merely doing what is expected of me. Shoto's legs were really giving out now. Only Izuku's strength kept him from hitting the ground. You're tired, Shoto. Do you want to continue this match? He shook his head. No, me sleepy. Midoriya bested me. Me want a bed. Izuku nodded. Go to sleep, Shoto. I'll bring you to the infirmary. Thank you. With that, Shoto's eyelids fell shut, and he went under. Izuku easily lifted his opponent into a bridal carry, and turned to a stunned Midnight. Please excuse us. We'll be on our way. It took the Phoenix leaving the field for the heroine to find her voice. Midoriya Izuku progresses to the next round. Izuku had just tucked Shoto into bed when Fumikage appeared at the infirmary doorway. Congratulations on your win. Can we expect the rest of your matches to turn into impromptu therapy sessions? I wouldn't know, Tokoyami, Izuku replied, turning to face his friend, but it would be a nice change. Though I don't know if the audience would be receptive to that. Humans always find blood sports entertaining. Dark Shadow suddenly emerged. Fumi wants Aizu to hug him. He got jealous seeing the candy cane experience Aizu's hugs. Dark Shadow. I am not jealous. Izuku huffed good-naturedly. Even so, I would never deprive you of hugs, Tokoyami. You obviously enjoy them, after all. To prove his point, the Phoenix closed the distance and encased his shorter friend in a tight hug, arms and wings together. Immediately, Fumikage relaxed into the ever-present warmth. Dark Shadow chuckled. Fumi also wants Aizu to call him by his given name from now on. Again, he is jealous that Aizu called Candy Cane by his name first. Fumikage spluttered indignantly. Dark Shadow. Cease such lies immediately. Is that true? Izuku asked. Despite his host's protests and attempts to get him to shut up, Dark Shadow beamed. Absolutely. I'm not only Fumi's quirk, but I can hear his innermost thoughts too. Fumi wants Aizu to no longer call him by his family name. By this point, Fumikage had simply given up trying to silence his quirk, burying his head into Izuku's chest in resignation. The Phoenix smiled, carting a hand through the raven's head feathers. It's okay, Fumi. No need to be embarrassed. We're close enough anyway. So as long as you call me Izuku, everything's good. Fumikage groaned, but he didn't say anything to refute Izuku. Anyways, isn't your match against Shiozaki up next? Indeed it is, Fumikage confirmed, pulling away from Izuku. I better get going. Watch out for the thorns, okay? I will, Izuku. Izuku would not lie to himself, he was nervous. Watching the live feed of Fumikage entering the field opposite Ibera made his heartbeat increase. Midnight's flag-off did not make things any easier, especially when the 1B student unleashed her vines upon his friend. Fumikage was immediately put on the defense. Diving and dodging from the thorny vines, he worked his way towards his opponent. When he got into striking range, he unleashed Dark Shadow. Ibera immediately shielded herself with her vines, and it was evidently clear that the thorns hurt both Dark Shadow and Fumikage. Even though the shadow being didn't bleed, Fumikage must have felt the pain through their shared connection. But Izuku noted he had to give Dark Shadow immense credit. Despite the pain, the shadow being refused to give in. Ibera, in an attempt to gain another advantage, loudly called Dark Shadow a demonic entity. She had hoped that by angering the quirk, Dark Shadow would go berserk. If Fumikage was too busy trying to rein in the shadow being, it would give her the chance to grab him with her vines and throw him out of bounds. And while it had the intended effect of pissing the shadow being off, it had some unintended consequences. Dark Shadow screeched angrily and sliced off her vines with her claws. Once the vines had been cut from her head, they fell to the ground like limp noodles, effectively useless. Ibra also didn't have the ability to regenerate them quickly. Fumikage immediately saw his chance. With his opponent distracted by her hair being sliced off, Fumikage surged forward, spun on his heel, and delivered a roundhouse kick to Ibra's exposed head. While Izuku would admit forefront that it wasn't the most expertly delivered, the kick still served its intended purpose. Ibra was left seriously disoriented, and Fumikage finished the match conclusively with a blow to the temple, knocking her out. Shiozaki Ibra is unable to continue. Tokoyami Fumikage advances to the next bracket. Midnight declared. Recovery Girl had the Medibots dispatched to pick up Ibra, while Fumikage made his own way back to the infirmary. Izuku was ready by the time both arrived. While he worked his healing flames upon the unconscious Ibra, Recovery Girl gave Fumikage a kiss and some more gummies. Izuku had Ibra tucked in, before turning to his friend, "Congrats on your win. I hope her inflammatory words didn't get to either one of you too badly." Fumikage replied, "I, frankly, do not know if she meant what she said literally, or if she was merely using them as a means to win. But, so long as she does not use such dark language in front of me or other less aesthetic-looking individuals in peacetime, I won't pursue the matter." That was another problem for another time. Once all of the cut vines were cleared away, the next match got underway. Mei was up against Iger. Just like Tenya before him, the redhead was ultimately no match for Mei's ingenious mind and boundless creativity. The budding inventor used all manner of long-ranged inventions that kept her opponent at a distance, preventing him from even landing a hit on her. After several minutes of one-sided back and forth, Mei used the exact same rocket-powered boxing glove launcher to propel Iger out of bounds. The spectators went crazy. One time might have been a lucky fluke, but a support department student beating two hero department students was a moment of history never before seen in any sports festival thus far. If Mei continued her streak, she stood a very good chance on placing in the top 3 podium. The match between Ochako and Tetsu was next. Once again, both competitors were on the same power level with no clear favorite or advantage for victory. Both duked it out in an attempt to push the other into submission. Tetsu's steel quirk certainly helped in mitigating any potential blows from Ochako, but for the gravity quirk girl, that was not the plan. Her goal was to cancel her opponent's gravity and toss him out of the field, but with his fast-paced punches and kicks, getting near was difficult. It was a long game, but Ochako did not falter. She finally got her chance when as Tetsu pulled his arm back for another punch, he made the mistake of exposing his chest for a second too long. Ochako pushed all 5 fingers against the steel, canceling his gravity. Tetsu began to float up, and Ochako grabbed his flailing legs. With all the strength she had, she threw him and cancelled her quirk right after. The momentum of gravity suddenly returning propelled Tetsu some of the way. As he hadn't turned himself into steel because of the shock, Tetsu hit the ground and skidded right over the boundary line. It was a conclusive victory. Tetsu is out of bounds. Uraraka Ochako advances to the semifinals. Picking himself up, Tetsu was visibly upset, but he put on a mature smile and thanked Ochako for the riveting match. Both teens headed down to the infirmary, where after an examination by Recovery Girl, were each given a kiss and some gummies. A brief intermission was announced for toilet breaks and food. This allowed Izuku and Fumikage to discuss the upcoming matches. "I'll be up against Hatsum, you against Uraraka. Will you be alright?" "I'll certainly do my best," Fumikage replied, "though I think speed will be the decisive card. If we can quickly get our opponents out of bounds, it will minimize the possibilities of injury and secure our place in the finals." Izuku nodded. "I probably won't be around to wish you good luck for your match, so I'll say it now, yeah? Thanks, all the best with yours too." The intermission came to an end. We're drawing to the final rounds of the Yui Sports Festival, folks. Present Mike cheered. History as we know it is in the making. Will we see our first support student make it to the podium? Who will come away as the overall champion? Our answers start now. As the spectators cheered, Izuku released a calming breath. He could do this. The doors rumbled open. Ladies, gentlemen and non-binary folk, the flaming chicken that is Midoriya Izuku once again takes to the stage, ready for his next brawl that will determine whether he makes it to the final. Waving to the cheering crowd, Izuku took his place on the field. As Mei's doors opened, Present Mike continued, will fire be able to stand against the boundless creativity of the human mind? Hatsum Mei stands between Midoriya and either catapults him to victory or the rotisserie. From across the field, Mei waved to him, 10 million points. Help me advertise my babies, will ya? Izuku nodded. He'll gladly cooperate. Midnight raised her cannontails, go wild, children, but don't forget the rules. Begin. Immediately, Mei whipped out what appeared to be a handheld rocket launcher and began firing projectiles. Izuku took to the air, realizing right away that these were homing missiles programmed to chase after objects bearing higher temperatures. The Phoenix was forced to unleash fireballs to intercept the missiles, lest he get knocked out of the sky. Mei laughed, good one. Now face this. A quick change to another launcher which fired not missiles, but large blasts of freezing cold water. While his body had no adverse reaction to water, Izuku was forced to dodge. Cold water was not an experience enjoyed by many, Izuku was no exception. If his body went into thermal shock, Mei could easily take him out after that. Is Midoriya on the defensive? Why is he not attacking? Present Mike wondered. I'm playing along, Yamada-sensei, Izuku thought inwardly, now it's time to get serious. Dodging another blast of water, Izuku unleashed his fire again. Each projectile of water was met with a fireball, both canceling each other out and leaving a cloud of steam. Izuku allowed a volleying for a short while, before deciding that playtime was over. Like a raptor swooping down on its prey, Izuku shot towards Mei, braving a hailstorm of water. He grabbed her, shot up into the air, tossed her away with a loud "wee." Already knowing that the match was over, Mei fished out a pellet from her pocket and tossed it at her landing point outside the boundary. It rapidly expanded into an airbag and broke her fall. Unfazed, Mei sat up and flashed a thumbs up, thanks for the free advertising. Izuku returned the thumbs up. Hatsum Mei is out of bounds. Midoriya Izuku earns his place in the final match. Midnight declared. As the spectators cheered, Mei bounded up to Izuku and shook his hand, kick some ass in the final, will ya? I'll certainly do my best. Both teens cleared off the field, allowing the match between Ochako and Fumikage to take place. Izuku noticed that his friends seemed to constantly have opponents of which he had no advantage over and were more or less on the same power level as him. The match between Fumikage and Ochako lasted much longer than his own. Both were determined to win, trading blows and attacks in an attempt to force the other into submission. Ochako tried multiple times to cancel Fumicage's gravity, though Dark Shadow would often prevent that through her own swiping attacks. It was evidently clear that with little to no background on hand-to-hand combat, this match was going to drag on. It lasted for about half an hour, of which both combatants wore each other down. One could say that Fumicage's victory at the end boiled down to sheer luck. Ochako, exhausted from the back and forth, stumbled on her feet, giving Fumikage and Dark Shadow the opportunity to deliver twin blows that not only hit the brunette's head, but the fall to the ground also knocked her out. Midnight declared the match over, and Fumikage slumped to the ground from his own exhaustion. Even though he was still conscious, seeing his friend in such a state prompted Izuku to request a stretcher to be also dispatched to save Fumikage the journey to the infirmary. Once the two teens had arrived, Ochako was tended to by Recovery Girl, while Izuku helped Fumikage replenish his energy. A 15-minute intermission was announced in order to give Ochako and Mei enough time to recuperate and prepare for the third-place match that preceded the final one that would determine the overall winner. Despite recovering from the apparent concussion she sustained, Ochako was determined to continue on. I won't give up just yet, she proclaimed to Izuku, Fumikage and Recovery Girl. A hero always gives their all until the very end. I'm going out there and be plus ultra, Just as you said, Midoriya? And really, who could stop someone with that much conviction? The intermission came to an end, and Ochako and Mei took their places on the field. Midnight flagged them off, and Ochako surged towards her opponent. Mei produced another launcher. Izuku wondered if these were her specialty, or if she just made them for the festival, and fired a large weighted net at Ochako, who dodged out of the way and continued her trajectory towards the inventor. More nets were fired, and one was able to pin Ochako to the ground. Immediately, Mei was upon her, using her muscle weight to hold her opponent down, keeping her hands and legs anchored to the ground and immobilizing her. There was some struggle, as Midnight counted down 10 seconds like a boxing match referee. However, Mei's strength prevailed, and the match was over. Hatsum Mei is the second runner-up of the Yui Sports Festival. The crowd's amazed and raucous cheers signaled to Izuku and Fumikage that it was time to get ready. Fumikage, all the best, yeah? The raven-headed teen nodded, seemingly deep in thought. Izuku didn't think too much about this, assuming that his friend was just tackling the nerves of the imminent match. He never expected what was to come. Fumikage wasn't the only one who had something on his mind. Ever since being catapulted out of bounds by Mei's boxing glove launcher, Tenya hadn't really been paying attention to the subsequent matches up in one as seating gallery. Intrusive, unwanted thoughts spun in his head like a typhoon. There was a prominent ache in his heart and stomach, and his body twitched with shudders that he had no control over. The roars of the crowd, present mixed loud commentary and the noise of battle taking place raked his ears, not helping to alleviate the pain his body was feeling. He had to remove himself from the current environment. He needed to find someplace quiet, where he could be alone to work out whatever torment he was going through without unwanted attention from others. Nobody said anything as Tenya got up from his seat and left the gallery. Even if someone did notice, they kept quiet. An empty corridor was Tenya's destination. The roar of the spectators could still be heard, but it was much more muffled now, as if further away. There was hardly anyone walking around, which helped with the stifling feeling clogging his lungs when he had been sitting up in the gallery. Yet, it seemed that the relative silence made his thoughts even louder. Basically, Tenya was confused and conflicted. It was an undisputed fact that one couldn't win everything in life. There was always someone better than you. It was expected that losses will be incurred in such competitive situations. Tenya rolled with logic. It was his lifeblood. It was the mantra that governed his waking hours and daily activities. But no matter how hard he tried to apply logic to the wound that showed no sign of healing on its own, it had no effect. The thoughts continued to spin, the ache only grew worse, and now it appeared that he was struggling to breathe. He had come to this corridor looking for solitude, but now all he wanted was for someone to hug him. He didn't want to be alone facing this. He wanted someone to be there for him. If only. Tenya. The bespectacled teen turned around, his eyes widening. T-Tensei? What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in Hosu? The pro-hero Ingenium, dressed in his armored hero outfit, came up to his younger brother and embraced him tightly. I came straight over as soon as I saw your match. I figured that you wanted some company. But Hosu is over 4 hours away. My match was only about an hour ago. Tenya's eyes widened even more. Don't tell me you dash. Silly dolt, Tensei teased. Do you really think I ran all the way from Hosu to here? Recovery girl would tan my ass if I ever did that again. I took the Shinkansen, it would be much faster, after all. Furthermore, I wasn't going to let my only brother suffer through immense sadness all by himself. This was what Tenya's aching heart wanted. His role model, his big brother, holding him close just as he had always done since Tenya was a young boy. But he still had so many questions. Tensei, why does it hurt so much? I know that losing is expected in life, but it feels like my heart is bleeding. I tried to think things through, but my head continues to spin. Tensei tightened his hug. You're trying to suppress your emotions. You shouldn't do that. You're stifling your body's attempts to release the pain. I know it feels terrible, but it's okay to not be okay. Just let it out, Tenya. I'm not going anywhere. The dam collapsed. No one, other than Ingenium, was around to witness Tenya break down into hysterical sobs. The older of the two gently stroked his brother's hair, soothing the distressed teen as the tears flowed. The hug remained tight, a grounding sensation that helped keep Tenya stable as he properly processed his loss and emotions. For 20 minutes, neither of them moved, until Tenya had calmed down sufficiently. "Do you want anything to drink? Orange juice perhaps?" Tenya let out a shuddering breath. "Why, I would like that." Fumicage's thoughts did not pertain to Ibra's inflammatory declaration of his quirk being a demonic entity. This was nothing he wasn't familiar with. Children and adults alike have decried Dark Shadow as a monster ever since his childhood. Unlike his quirk, Fumicage wasn't even affected by Ibra's words. As he stood behind the metal doors, he contemplated on his chances of winning. Realistically, it wasn't big. The fact that he wore sunglasses whenever he was around Izuku should have been an easy answer. Izuku could create fire that was the very bane of Dark Shadow's existence. All his friend needed to do was create a conflagration, leaving him effectively quirkless and with minimal hand-to-hand combat capabilities, little chance of winning. Izuku already had the match in the bag. Nothing else needed to be said. How then should he, Fumicage, concede defeat? He could attempt to put up a fight, but it would be pointless. Dark Shadow would be forced to go through a traumatic event for nothing, and as the darker recesses of his mind whispered, it would be a farce to Izuku, an insult even. It was clear that all he could reasonably do was loudly declare his intent to forfeit the match before it could officially begin. At least he could do so with dignity, and Izuku would be declared as the winner, as he rightfully and justly should. As the doors opened with a great rumble, Fumicage braced himself for what he was about to do. Facing off against the flaming chicken is the edgy raven of darkness, Tokoyami Fumicage. The tension and excitement was palpable, and Fumicage inwardly grimaced on not being able to give what the spectators wanted. Alas, there was nothing he could do without causing pain to Dark Shadow. Midnight raised her cat-o'-nine tails for what would be the last time. Go all out, you two. Give the audience one final hurrah and finish with a bang. This was it. This was the moment. Kiyama-sensei, there is something I need to say. Fumicage spoke loudly, and just like that, the entire stadium fell silent. I wish to forfeit dash. No. Fumicage blinked. Izuku I dash. Fumi, I don't want you to forfeit. You deserve your chance to win as well. Putting aside the fact that Izuku had somehow read his mind, Fumicage tried to argue his case. Izuku, the chances of me winning are almost non-existent. Your brightness will render me and Dark Shadow powerless. It is only logical that I forfeit now. Then we'll fight without quirks. I won't use my fire or wings, Izuku suggested. Fumicage remained steadfast. You still have the advantage of strength over me. All you need to do is wrestle me to the ground and pin me for 10 seconds. Again, you will win easily. Fine, we'll leave this to chance, Izuku proposed. 1 round of rock scissors paper, and the winner will win the sports festival. The entire stadium and most of the country watched on with no uncertain amounts of bemusement as both avians stepped closer, pumped clenched fists upon their palm, and produced their signals. Izuku made its scissors. Fumicage made a rock. Izuku grinned, and that settles it. He came to Fumicage's side and raised his friend's hand up. Ladies, gentlemen and non-binary folk, I present to you all, the winner of the Yui Sports Festival, Tokoyami Fumicage. Fumicage felt many things in that moment. Disbelief, some vestiges of uncertainty, a tiny bit of denial, a smidgen of surprise, a minuscule of joy, and a good amount of a need to screech into the void. It was evidently clear that the very real fact of him winning the sports festival over a children's game that could have gone either way still had not fully registered in his brain, even as he stood atop the first-place podium, slowing rising up to the eyes of the entire stadium and the country. On both his sides were Izuku in second place and Mei in third. The pink-haired inventor was having the time of her life, waving excitedly as they came into view to cheers and applause. Fireworks blasted overhead, and fountains of fire burst up from pyrotechnic jets. Presenting to you all, the 3 winners of the Yui Sports Festival. Both Fumicage and Izuku waved to the crowds. We've come a long way, hours of trials and tribulations, not to mention all kinds of shenanigans and impromptu therapy courtesy of one flaming chicken. What a festival this has been, but let's not end the day on a dull note. The stage is yours, Kiyama. Thanks, Yamada. Midnight called back. It has been an exhilarating day thus far, but let's all muster up one last hurrah to honor our top 3 competitors. Thunderous applause followed. Let us proceed with the award ceremony. Please welcome our esteemed principal of UE who will present the medals to our winners. Cheerful laughter echoed across the stadium. Hello everyone. My mouse, dog or bear? Either way, I am Principal Nizu. The Chimera waved to the crowd, taking his place by the podium. Midnight came up to her boss with a tray bearing the 3 medals. It's all on you now, Nizu. Reaching up and taking the bronze medal, Nizu went up to Mei. Congratulations, Hatsum. You have made history by being the first non-heroic student ever to make it to the podium. Your genius and unlimited creativity has shown to the entire country that the human mind can rival, even surpass quirks at their strongest. Take pride, Hatsum. This is a defining moment in your journey to becoming a top support inventor for future generations. Of course, my babies are gonna rock this world down to the very foundations. Mei accepted the medal with a blinding smile. The silver medal was next, Midoriya. I have to say, you have made this year's festival unexpectedly entertaining and game-changing. You have created waves today, and I will bet the fur on my head that you will continue to do so in the years to come. Never change, Midoriya, and you will go far. Putting the medal around the phoenix's neck, Nizu leaned in to give his favorite student a hug. In doing so, the Chimera whispered, "Meet me in my office after the festival ends. There is something I need to talk to you about." Izuku nodded. And finally, the gold medal. Tokoyami, your performance today has shown to everyone watching that just because someone doesn't have a positive aesthetic or quirk, it doesn't mean that they can't be successful. And even if your final match was won by luck, you have still proven yourself by coming this far through your own skill and Dark Shadow's prowess. Many doors are opening for you, Tokoyami, and boundless opportunities await. Just like with Izuku, Nizu leaned close when slipping the medal around Fumicage's neck. Meet me in my office when this is over. I need to talk to you and Izuku about something important. All right, Fumicage whispered back. With a satisfied smile, Nizu turned back towards the students gathered before the podium, and there you have it. The winners of this year's sports festival. However, this is far from the end. Even though you did not make it this time around, that does not make you any less of a budding hope for the future. This is not a time to rest on our laurels, for when tomorrow comes, we must rise to new challenges. But I have confidence in every single one of you. Your potential for growth continues to flourish each day, and every challenge has a solution. You all, dear students, are the solutions that will ensure the lasting peace for this country and its citizens in the years to follow. Nizu paused to allow the students and spectators to cheer, but I've spoken for too long. I'm sure everyone is exhausted, and the weekend beckons our weary bodies. So to draw this sports festival to a close, I would like to invite everyone to one last hurrah. With me now, go beyond your best. Plus ultra, the entire stadium erupted, followed by raucous applause. And with that, we have come to the end of the sports festival. Please take care on your way home, and to our student participants, make sure to get a good rest. This is Present Mike Dash, and Aizawa Shoyuta Dash. Signing off, the voice hero concluded for the both of them. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. There are some very important things we need to cover before the day is done, said Nizu, once all 3 were in the privacy of his office. Do they pertain to what I did to Enduhor? Asked Izuku. That's one of the things. But first things first, internships, Nizu replied. You may or may not be aware of this, but it is tradition for first-year heroic students to attend a week-long internship with a pro-hero of their choice after the sports festival. As it is, Izuku, I already have an internship offer sent directly from Hawks. The number 3 hero? Exactly, Nizu nodded. He was so impressed by your performance during the obstacle course that he sent it even before the festival ended. Also, he wants you as an intern too, Fumicage. Me? Yes, he was apparently so amused by your final match with Izuku that he is offering you an internship. In fact, I should be getting his email anytime. A pinging noise came from the Chimera's computer. Now. Both avians shared a look. deeply aware that this was an opportunity not to be passed up. That aside, if either one or both of you choose to intern with Hawks, there is something you need to know, Nizu continued. Hawks may be a full-fledged pro-hero with his own agency and among the top in the charts, but he has a dark history that I intend to do everything in my power to free him from. What do you mean? Asked Izuku, noticing the Chimera's troubled expression. I will start from the beginning. Nizu said. Before becoming Hawks, Takami Kigo grew up in an impoverished family with an abusive father. His childhood was a difficult one, but everything changed on one innocuous day. Kigo saved 6 lives from a would-be fatal car accident, and when word got out that the hero was actually a child, he was approached by representatives from the HPSC. The Hero Commission? Fumikage blinked. Exactly, Nizu nodded. Now, I will digress a bit here. The HPSC was set up as an independent law enforcement organization separate from the National Diet, with the intent to keep the peace in society and oversee pro-heroes. However, it is terribly ironic that they still tout such goals when in reality, the entire organization has festered from corruption. In an attempt to maintain the public's squeaky clean image of pro-heroes, the Commission has committed innumerable crimes at the expense of innocent civilians, groups, and even pro-heroes who tried to break the status quo. Is that why Enduhor has been able to get away with his Quirk marriage and domestic abuse for so long? It appears so, Nizu confirmed. Keep in mind, you too, that I had been keeping tabs on Endeavor ever since he graduated from UE. Whenever someone or an organization, say a newspaper, suspected that something was going on in the Todoroki household, they either received a large donation from an unknown donor or mysteriously stopped whatever investigation they had been spearheading. I can say with great certainty that it is either Endeavor or the HPSC who bribed their silence, or took drastic measures to make sure the monster's crimes did not come to light. Izuku and Fumikage glanced at one another, an uncomfortable sensation churning in their stomachs. Putting Endeavor's criminal ongoings aside for a moment, let's get back to Hawks for now, said Nizu. After he was approached by the Commission representatives, he was sold to the organization. From what I gathered, the meeting between his mother and the men was short, not even 15 minutes. Takami-san was paid an incredible sum, and her only child was put through an inhumane training regimen that would be described as nothing short of torture for over 10 years. Even after he set up his own agency, Hawks remained chained to the HPSC as a figurehead for the perfect hero. A beat of silence. How did you uncover all of this? Asked Fumikage. I have my Quirk, high specs, to thank for that, Nizu replied. The firewalls and network security measures adopted by the HPSC are among the strongest in the country, but I was able to spot and take advantage of the tiniest chinks in their digital armor to create a hole small enough for me to get in without notifying their servers that their security had been breached. But I suppose that even with all of this evidence, you can't go public with them yet? That's right, the principal nodded. I am but a mere individual. Why would the government listen to an animal with a quirk that barely puts him on the same level as humans? Also, the HPSC and Endeavor engage with some of the most powerful law firms in the country that help them cover their tracks. Nothing short of a public confession will be enough to bring them to justice. Izuku took a sip of his offered tea and set the cup down. Principal Nizu, be honest with us. Why else will you be telling us all of this information other than on the possibility that we will intern with Hawks? Nizu was more than ready to be honest with his favorite student. Izuku, you came really close to following in Hawks' footsteps last year. What do you mean? When your quirk manifested and you cremated that slime villain in front of 3 pro-heroes, law enforcement personnel and a crowd of civilians, the stage would have been set for representatives from the HPSC to come knocking at your door. Think about it, a pyrokinetic quirk that could cremate individuals to ashes in seconds. There is no way the Commission would not have set their sights on you, had it not been for external events keeping their attention away. As it was, the HPSC was still weathering the fallout from one of their associates getting into trouble with the Taiwanese government, which temporarily kept their attention away from what happened in Mizudafu. Izuku didn't know what to say. He hadn't even considered such a scenario when he saved Katsuki from the villain and the hero's ineptitude. But that doesn't mean that the Commission will lay off their pursuit, Nizu continued, your public revelations about Endeavor during your match with Shoto has triggered a media firestorm that currently shows no sign of stopping. I know that you haven't had a chance to see social media yet, but have a look at what is trending now. The Chimera swiveled his computer screen to let Izuku see. It was of the Twitter homepage, with several hashtags running into overdrive with thousands of mentions and posts coming in by the minute. Hashtag is Endeavor a criminal? Hashtag flaming chicken whistleblower. Hashtag HPSC cover-up. Hashtag Enduhor. Hashtag down with Endeavor. Hashtag dissolve Kissy. Izuku, you may not have intended it to be so, but this is a good example of a character assassination. Endeavor and the HPSC will not be taking this sitting down. And while I will wholeheartedly assist you with any legal action pursued by Endeavor, you need to be aware that the Commission will see this as an excuse to target you in earnest. They may try to bribe or deceive you and your mother, just like as they did with Hawks, or use more clandestine means to silence your voice. What I am saying, Izuku, is that you need to be careful. Before your match with Shoto, I had hoped that your internship offer from Hawks would allow us to begin the process of freeing him from the HPSC's control. But in light of such additional revelations, things have become more complicated. You have a target painted on your back, and several arrows are being drawn. Remember, people will do anything to maintain the status quo, even if it means blood being spilt. Do you want to talk about it? Asked Fumikic. I think Principal Nizu covered all important bases, Izuku replied as he let Dark Shadow hug him, so honestly, there isn't really much to talk about. I will need to be careful with any suspicious figures, and I should inform my mum about it too. Fumikic nodded with a sigh. Just when I thought our society couldn't get any worse, I am sadly proven otherwise. It is undeniable, but we're going to fix this, one way or another, Izuku said firmly. I won't let my sports festival speech become meaningless platitudes. Even if I have to reduce someone to ashes, I won't hesitate. Just make sure to cover your tracks if it comes to that, Fumikic reminded. Most definitely. The weekend passed with no major incidents or hiccups. While this could have been seen as a promising sign, Izuku remained vigilant. In all likelihood, the Commission was biding their time for the right moment to begin their assault. He was not going to give them a reason to strike earlier though. Izuku would have to be living under a rock to not notice all of the articles, videos, even memes of him that sprung up on the internet following the sports festival. The last one in particular was both funny and cringy at the same time, especially those which centered around him yeeting any and everything internet users could imagine, and a satirical warning for all men to buy groin protectors, lest a flaming chicken comes around to ruin their family jewels. That one actually stemmed from a real-life surge in purchases of said protectors, especially among male pro-heroes who suddenly realized their hubris and sought protection for their manliness. But that wasn't even the most outrageous reaction to Izuku's performance. As the Phoenix found out on Sunday night, he had a cult following with over 1,000 members, with more joining by the day, who gathered in abandoned warehouses at night to perform religious ceremonies and make sacrifices, which are mostly wax models of Endeavor's head melted over a sacred fire before a full-sized golden statue of Izuku, posed like a venerated angel or god. Izuku knew that if he responded to such attention or seemed to embrace it in a positive manner, it would give the HPSC the excuse they needed to come after him. So he stayed quiet, and come Monday, despite the whispers and sneaked glances at him throughout his train ride, he ignored it all and met up with Fumikic at the station as always. It was raining that morning, so the two avians shared an umbrella as they trudged up to the main campus. They joined their fellow classmates, lingering around until the bell rang. Those who weren't already at their desks quickly slipped into place, as Aizawa sauntered into the room with a thermos of coffee that was as large as his head. Good morning, class. Morning, sensei. Before we begin with homeroom, I have a couple of announcements to make, the eternally tired hobo drawled. Today, a new student will be joining our class. You all should know who he is by now. He turned towards the door. You can come in now. It opened, and a nervous Hitoshi stepped inside. Shinso, you'll be taking the seat behind Midoriya? The purple-haired insomniac nodded, hurrying over to the desk and sitting down. Second, Aizawa continued, we will be having a special hero informatics class during homeroom. Several students stiffened. Was this a pop quiz? We will be choosing your hero names today. Aizawa put those fears to rest. The relief was mixed with excited cheers. The hobo glared, Quirk activated, prompting everyone to go silent immediately. As I was saying, this is in conjunction to the internships most of you will be partaking in, Aizawa continued. Usually, this would have been only offered to second and third year students, but in light of the USJ incident, the school has decided to extend it to all first-year heroic students. Not only are we proving that you all are work-ready, it also shows that you are worthy of being future pro-heroes. I shouldn't have to remind you that your overall performance and behavior during your internship could make or break your career before it even begins. Everyone got the message. Before we move to hero names, these are the number of offers for each student in this class. Aizawa activated the holographic screen, and all 20 names appeared. A horizontal bar chart manifested with a descending number of offers. Despite being eliminated relatively early during the sports festival, Shoto's name was at the top with several thousand offers. Fumikage was second, followed by Tenya and then Momo. Near the bottom of the list, Izuku's name stood with slightly over 70 offers. Aizawa-sensei. Mina raised her hand. Midokun came second during the festival. Why does he have so few offers? Most hero agencies would rather not have someone who will not hesitate to castrate the number 2 hero and declare it on live television. Aizawa replied, also, I must point out that the majority of agencies in Japan are run by male pro-heroes who are extremely sensitive about their family jewels. Nothing else needed to be said further. Shinso will be interning with me since he has only been in the heroics course since last Friday. Aizawa turned off the screen, crouched down, and produced 19 binders of varying thickness. At the end of homeroom, come collect your folder. It contains every internship offer made to you. Read through each of them carefully, and inform me of your selection by the end of this week. Are we all clear? Yes, sensei? Good, the hobo nodded. Now with that out of the way, we can move on to Dash. Selecting your brand name, for you will parade your stuff come next week. The door slammed open, revealing an excited Midnight as she walked into the room, hips swaying side to side in an obvious show of seduction. Midnight will oversee the next 25 minutes. I'm going to sleep. Don't disturb me unless she is unable to handle the problem. Someone is dying, or Midoriya decided to go feral and castrate all might as well. While such a concept is entertaining, there's no need for the call-out, Izuku thought to himself. White bards were distributed. Izuku took his from Tetsu and began mulling over ideas. About 5 minutes in, Midnight announced, all right, children, those who already have something to present can come up front. As you and Mina went up and had their draft ideas rejected for being too long or copyrighted, Izuku got out of his seat and went over to Fumikage. Hey, how's your name coming along? I've got some ideas, but I want something that represents who I am. Since you have a dark, gothic aesthetic going on, maybe something along that line? Interesting, I'll give it some thought. Fumikage nodded. What about you? Actually, I would like to know if you're willing to have a duo name with me. A duo name? Yeah. Like, have you heard about the Wild Wild Pussycats? They sound vaguely familiar. They are a quartet of pro-heroes with a feline aesthetic. They each have their own individual hero names, but most people know them by their team name. I was thinking, since we're both avians, we could have a duo name. Fumikage understood where his friend was coming from. So, I have a hero name associated with darkness, and yours with light? That's what I had in mind. Sounds interesting, Fumikage grinned. I can see the appeal. So if we're going to go with that line, I have an idea. How about Amaterasu, named after the goddess of the sun? I like that. And I suppose you are going to call yourself Tsukuyami, after the god of the moon? It fits, Fumikage nodded. Both worked to finalize their names. As they did so, Shoto suddenly came up to them. Midoriya, Tokoyami. I need your help. What's up, Shoto? I can't quite decide on a name, the dual-quirked teen admitted, looking a little sheepish. What did you have in mind? Asked Fumikage. I was thinking of going with my given name, Shoto replied. I don't want people to associate me with my father, but I'm not entirely sure. Sit with us, Izuku said. I'm sure we can come up with something. As the trio brainstormed, more students came up to present their names. Tenya went with the speed hero, track star. Mashira decided on the martial art heroine, tail spin. Mezzo settled on the six-armed hero, multitasker, and Momo went with the creation heroine, Genesis. Hitoshi decided on Mindjack, something simpler since he declared his intention to go into underground heroics like Aizawa. Homeroom was almost over, with only 5 minutes left. We only have 3 more to go. Midoriya, Tokoyami and Todoroki, come forward so we can wrap things up. The trio went up front. Shoto decided to go first, the thermodynamic hero, Frost Flare. Extremely fitting. Midnight beamed, I approve. Now, what about you two? Kiyama-sensei, Fumikage and I decided on duo names, Izuku said. Oh, what do you have in mind? Midnight was intrigued. The hero of light, Amaterasu. And I will go as the hero of darkness, Tsukuyomi. Going for the mythological and yin-yang appeal? Well, you two certainly fit the aesthetic, so I approve. Aizawa awakens as if on cue. With that settled, your internships will last for a week and Yui will cover for travel expenses to your choice of agency and back. Make sure to choose carefully. Each pro hero specializes in different areas. You could either have a fruitful experience during your internship or a complete waste of time. That is all. Get ready for English next. So you two are going to intern with Hawks? Hitoshi asked after a bite of food. That's our plan, Fumikage replied, with Izuku nodding. We might learn quite a bit from him, being the number 3 hero after all. And not because you two have bird characteristics? Hitoshi asked in jest. I believe that may have been a small part of why he sent us offers, though it has more to do with our sports festival performances, Izuku replied. Hitoshi made a noise of acknowledgement, before turning to Shoto. And what about you? I would probably have to intern with my father. The flaming dickbag? That insult made Shoto's eyes lighten a little. I absolutely despise him, but he would know the most on how to control my fire. If that's your reason, why not Izuku? I'm sure Hawks wouldn't mind his intern teaching his own intern for a time during the week. It was clearly a joke, but the nature of the conversation topic was not lost. Shoto, if you're not comfortable interning with Enduhor, Hitoshi snickered at the bastardist name, I'm sure Aizawa-sensei will be willing to take you as an intern. If there is one pro hero who knows what he's doing, it's him. I'll think about it. There wasn't much else to say beyond that. Good afternoon. May Jiru-san and I sit with you all? Momo suddenly appeared with Kyuka by her side. We were a little late to the cafeteria, and all of the tables were taken. By all means, Izuku nodded. Once the two girls sat down and gave thanks for the food, the conversation picked up again. Where do you two intend to internship at? Asked Fumikage. Haven't decided yet, Kyuka replied. I had a quick glance at my binder earlier, Momo added. The offer from the pro-heroine Iwabami appears interesting. No, absolutely not, Izuku suddenly interrupted, surprising everyone at the table. Do not choose Iwabami under any circumstances. What do you mean? As Aizawa-sensei said earlier, you will be setting yourself up for a waste of time, Izuku explained. Iwabami can hardly be considered a proper pro-heroine. More often than not, she is too busy promoting her latest line of cosmetics or participating in fashion runway shows. My instinct is that she will just use you as some kind of background model in one of her commercials, rather than teach you anything meaningful. Kyuka found her tongue after a moment. How do you know this? Iwabami pushes the limit of her media presence whenever she can. I've seen far too many of her commercials taking up airtime on television or YouTube for it to be normal. It doesn't take much to know that she is merely using her status as a licensed pro-heroine to boost her monetary sales. Also, Yairose-san, if you hear of anyone else from our class or 1B intending to intern with her, I strongly recommend that you try to persuade them to choose someone else if possible. Okay, I will, Momo nodded. I guess I have to do a more thorough scan of my offers. If it helps, I wouldn't mind going through them with you if you have some spare time, Izuku offered. When I was younger, I used to analyze pro heroes a lot, so I might be able to help narrow down some possibilities. Momo's eyes lit up. Would you? I would be most appreciative of your help. Just let me know, I'll be there, Izuku nodded. There was a lull in the conversation after that. Hitoshi swallowed his last mouthful of food before noticing that Shoto appeared to be staring intently at his phone. Yo, Candy Cane, what's got your attention? Startling out of his trance, Shoto blinked. Sorry, what? Reading something interesting? Hitoshi asked. Well, apparently the hero killer has gone missing? That got everyone's attention. The hero killer, Stain? The former vigilante-turned-villain who has killed over 24 pro-heroes and permanently incapacitated over 50 others? Kyuka raised an eyebrow. Shoto nodded. And he's gone missing? Fumikage parroted. That's what people are saying. Shoto continued, there hasn't been any new attacks in over 2 weeks, when according to estimates, Stain would have targeted 1 pro-hero per week. People are beginning to speculate about what happened to him. Isn't that a good thing? Momo asked. Yeah, but why would he suddenly disappear into thin air? Hitoshi wondered, didn't he proclaim that his goal is to rid the world of all fake heroes, and he won't stop until society has been cleansed? I don't know, Shoto shrugged. The only thing that is certain is that he hasn't been seen in weeks. Despite staying silent throughout that revelation, Izuku was in deep thought. A notorious villain that pro-heroes and law enforcement alike were thus far not able to capture, suddenly going missing? No matter how he tried to rationalize it, the whole thing smelled of rotten fish. There was definitely something going on here. Perhaps when he and Fumikage traveled to Fukuoka, he will bring this up to Hawks.